Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use permit requests, and to consider appeals from the decision of the staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance, and to then make decisions in such matters. The members of this board are citizens of the City of Des Moines and have been appointed to the board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and receive no compensation for their public service. And I'll take a minute here to introduce our board members. On the audience's right is John Chido. Next to him is Dave Gare. Next to him is Lynn Carlson. I'm the board chair, Mel Pins, and on my right is Marlis Jones, and next to her is Cindy Smith. This is a 7-member board, and we're missing one member today, Nathan Blake. And I'll also introduce our city staff. Here in the front row, on the audience's left by the podium is Bert Dross, city planner, Catherine Dawstart, city planner, Eric Lundy, city planner, and our zoning enforcement officer, Sue Ann Donovan. And being extra polite, but I'll go ahead and introduce her, is our city's legal counsel, Glenna Frank. And I'm going to take a couple minutes here and I'll go through how our procedure works today. We will help all of you through the process. For some of you, this may be the first time here. You might hope this is the only time you'll need to be here. But we'll help everybody through the process. But to give you a little background here, while this is an open public meeting, it does have a formal process. The meeting is being recorded. We should also be being broadcast live right now on the city's cable channel, and you can also see us in reruns late night if you would like to. The board members have received a copy of the agenda as well as the staff recommendations. Copies of the agenda and the staff recommendation is available in the tray here just outside the door as you entered the room. So when I'm through with my remarks here, if you haven't grabbed an agenda yet, feel free to step up and get one. This board is required to base its decision in each case upon the criteria that's been established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each appeal will be announced in the order as presented on the agenda. Staff will first give a brief explanation of the appeal. Any written comments received by the staff prior to the hearing will be distributed to the board or otherwise identified during the staff presentation. The appellant or a representative of the appellant will then be allowed to speak first. They will be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. Anyone present in support of the appeal will then be allowed up to 5 minutes each to present their comments. Following that, any person present in opposition to the appeal will then be allowed up to 5 minutes each to present their comments. The applicant will then be allowed up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal or other closing comments if there is any opposition to their request. All speakers are required to speak only from the podium here up at the front left and to begin their presentation by giving both their name and address. If you're here personally, your home address works. If you're here in a professional capacity as a consultant or an attorney, your business address will work fine. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are also asked to ensure that they are respectful of time considerations. If necessary, the board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. The board will then close any further public comment on the agenda item, and the board will immediately deliberate the request, and we will make a decision here today. If your appeal is approved, we ask that you wait until about midweek of next week to go to the Permit and Development Center if you would need any necessary building permits. so that the decision of this board can be documented in the form of a decision and order and provided to you as well as our permit staff. Any appeal that is approved by this board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision by this board, or such approval shall expire. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed. They will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendations in the staff report, unless there's an individual present here or a member of this board that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and separately considered under the public hearing agenda. And I'll help everybody through that consent agenda here in just a minute. The decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Polk County District Court. So if you believed you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy to any decision we make is to seek relief through the district court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong or need amendment, you may petition the city council to change those regulations in the future. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. So if you have any photos or blueprints or diagrams that you want to share with us in your presentation, you'll need to either let the board have those or allow them to make suitable copies. Just some quick housekeeping items. We would ask that you avoid any undue conversation in the audience so as to not be disruptive or distracting from the hearing that is in progress. And you're doing a fine job of that so far. We would also ask ensure your cell phone has been silenced, also a positive. And if you need to use a restroom, just leave through the door here and just past the staircase down the hallway. There are restrooms on your left. You don't have to go downstairs, so they're right outside the door here. Once the agenda item you are interested in has been completed, you're welcome to leave the hearing. And if need be, if the hearing goes past about 3:30 or so, we'll have a 5-minute break. So what we're going to do here briefly is we're going to go over the existing agenda we have to see if we have any changes, which I don't think we do. Bert, do you have any updates for us?
No, this is the first time in a long time, no changes.
Okay. So what we've got here is we have, I believe, we have 10 items that staff is recommending approval for. So those are our consent agenda items. They are items 1 through 10. This means that the requested permits or exceptions or variances, staff is recommending approval subject to sometimes a list of conditions that the applicant will still need to comply with. Pardon me. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read through those. So we would probably vote to approve these in one block unless there's a member of the audience here who does not want us to approve these. And then what we would do is we would pull it off the consent agenda and we would consider it separately under the public hearing agenda, where then we'd have both sides present their reasoning of the case. So if there's anybody here in opposition to any one of these items I read, as I read the item, just please raise your hand. So item 1 is an amendment request for a special permit in the vicinity of 1203 Hartford Avenue. Is there anyone here that's opposed to granting the requested permit in item 1? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Item 2 is an exception request at 4421 Southeast 35th Street. Anybody here in opposition to that? Seeing none. Item 3 is an exception request at 317 East Court Avenue. Is there anybody here in opposition to item 3? If so, please just raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Item 4 is an exception request at 2404 57th Street. Going once, going twice. Item 5 is an exception request at 720 and 730 East 2nd Street. Anyone with a concern? Seeing none. Item 6 is a special permit request in the vicinity of 3101 East 12th Street. Item 7 is an exception request at 1817 23rd Street. And item 8 is an exception request at 4101 John Lind Road. Item 9, a special permit request at 1230 East 17th Street. And finally, item 10 is a special permit request at 1235 Sampson Street. So just one final call here. If there's anybody with a concern on items 1 through 10 with us granting an appeal, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, if there's not a member of this board that has a concern with any of these items, would there be a motion to grant approval for items 1 through 10?
I make a motion.
Motion by John, second by Marlis. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously, 6-0. So if you were here for items 1 through 10, they have been approved, subject to staff recommendations. And probably by Wednesday or Thursday, we'll have that formally signed off in a decision in order. And you can, we'll send you a copy of that. So thank you for coming in. If you're here for items 1 through 10, we're through with those. Okay, so now the homework begins. So for the public portion of the agenda, the first item that we will hear testimony on is a variance and exception request in the vicinity of 304 East Walnut Street. And I think Bert Drost is going to kick us off today.
Chair, members of the board, item number 11 is a request that would allow construction of a hotel with a maximum height of 82.5 feet. The subject property is located on the north side of East Walnut Street at the corner with East 3rd Street. It's located within the Capital Dominance Overlay District, which says that any commercial building shall not exceed 55 feet in height. So in order to go up to 82 feet, they need a variance to that overlay district requirement, and then they would also need an exception of 7.5 over the otherwise allowed 75-foot height in the C3B district. So there's really two appeals that are necessary. Again, they would be building a hotel right here. Just for point of reference, there's the new City Square development on the block to the west that has a hotel, and then on the next block further west is the Embassy Suites Hotel. Here's a design of what they're proposing. And the applicant's architect will be going over these shortly as well. But this is just to give you an idea of what the building would look like. This is at the corner of East 3rd and East Walnut. This is the floor plan. You can see that it would cover most of the block. It's a unique design in that the parking garage would actually be on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building. So they'd have the main lobby area and some retail on the street level, and then there'd be a couple levels of parking with the hotel rooms above that. And here's the view from East 3rd Street. This is along East Walnut Street. And again, this would be the north side elevation, and then the east side elevation. And then really the intent of the Capital Dominance Overlay District that they're appealing is to preserve views of the Iowa State Capitol. So the applicant has put together this view study that they'll be going over shortly, but so I'll let the applicant cover that. Staff did take a look at it, and we kind of just for a rough estimate got an idea of where the views would be that are being impacted, the views of the Capitol would be impacted. So just following the line, really it's the properties that are within this area would have their view blocked of the Capitol. You can see Embassy Suites right here is already in a portion of that area, but again, the applicant will be making that argument as well. And then this is just the section of the city's land use plan that deals with the intent of the Capital Dominance Overlay, and it's to protect the views of the Capitol. Shows the main corridors, really the East Locust corridor, and then as well the view from Principal Park, baseball stadium. Here are some site photos. So you can see right now it's just a surface parking lot. And this is on Walnut Street looking towards the Capitol. So the building would be built generally in this area. By right, they're allowed to build up to 55 feet. So you can kind of estimate where that would be. And they're asking again to go up to 82.5 feet. So here's the same view from a little further back. And then this is from across the river. This is at City Square apartment building. That's just to the west of the subject property. So if you can imagine, the new building would be just in this gap right here. The City Square building is also at 75 feet, so this new building would be about 7.5 feet taller than that gray building there. And then here's another view from the top of the parking garage on Court Avenue. I know it's hard to see. I can try to zoom in. That's probably as good as it gets. This gray building right here is that City Square apartment building, and again, the new building would be just to the west, to the east of that gray building, so it'd be behind the current federal courthouse right there. And then here's the consent map. We did get several cards in support and several in opposition, and there's also a letter going around from the Historic East Village Neighborhood Association. From staff's perspective, we didn't feel that they satisfied the criteria necessary for granting a variance. We did feel that they satisfied, because as you know, the variance requires the test of an unnecessary hardship. We did feel that they satisfied the criteria necessary for granting an exception, which only requires them to show a practical difficulty. The practical difficulty test would allow them to go up to 75 feet in height. So really, our recommendation is that they keep the building to 75 feet in height rather than the requested 82.5 feet of height. So our recommendation, again, is just subject to two conditions that I won't read for the sake of time. But any questions for me?
Bert, a brief one. You mentioned the City Square building as well as Embassy Suites, both of which are commercial and hotel buildings that I would probably assume are kind of similar for what they do as a business. Did either Embassy Suites or City Square require relief from the board or the zoning ordinance?
The Embassy Suites predated the capital dominance overlay,
Okay.
so they weren't subject to it. I don't know the official height. I've heard people say that it's 100 feet in height, but I can't really verify that as being true or not.
Right.
On this block immediately to the west,
Yep.
the hotel along Locust Street did get an exception to allow them to be 75 feet in height.
Okay.
This apartment building on the south part of the lot, since it's residentially used, it's allowed to go up to 75 feet in height.
Okay.
So I believe that is also 75 feet in height.
Okay. All right. And then commensurate to that your staff rec is, hey, yeah, we're okay with an exception, but at the 75 foot, which would make it about similar in height as what's just west of it.
Right.
Correct? Okay.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay. All right. Thank you, Bert. Okay, so the way the process works, now the applicant, JB Properties or their representative, the applicant can step up, and we'll give them 10 minutes to present their case and their reasoning for their requested variance and exception. Good afternoon, welcome. All right, we just need your name and address, and then you got the floor.
All right. My name's Jesse Hadley. I'm Senior Project Manager with JLG Architects. Our office is located at 322 First Avenue North, Suite 600. That's Minneapolis, 55401.
Okay, all right.
Good afternoon, members of the board here. Appreciate the opportunity to present the proposed hotel development project here. And Bert, thank you for a thorough summary here for the board. Okay, so Bert has already kind of walked through a lot of the design. I wanted to just put a little bit more attention into how the program is affected by the site logistics. And just to take a step back here, with the current zoning being C3B, hotel use is a permitted use for that zoning district. And so when you're working and designing with hotels, in particular, the major franchises, they have minimum requirements in terms of what they need to see developed in terms of parking counts, total number of hotel rooms, and then they had their various amenity spaces. And you'll notice that across the street there's a Staybridge Hotel, and that particular location is a larger site. They have the ability to spread out more. This is a more compact footprint, and it's also zoned to be able to have zero lot line construction. So we're largely, building out almost every square inch, or proposing, that is, to build out every square inch of the 22,000 square foot lot. And because it's a smaller footprint, we're kind of forced to go more vertical with the design. And so we evaluated several options on how we could accomplish keeping the project below the 75-foot height limit, with the hopes that we'd only need an exception on the project. And as we worked through closely with the Marriott franchise, we've actually come up with some creative solutions to just get to the height that we're at right now, which is the 82.5 feet. And so I'll just kind of walk through the plans briefly, and then what I'd like to do is present the view corridor study that Bert had mentioned earlier, and then we'd like to just be able to share some concluding thoughts then, okay? So the hotel entrance is along 3rd Street here. We have a parking ramp on the 2nd and 3rd level. You come in off of 3rd here to park up above the 1st floor, which is primarily hotel check-in and lobby space. We also have retail area that is facing along Walnut here. So this is the 1st floor plan, which we kind of reoriented. Thank you. So the floor plan has just been reoriented here. 3rd Street is along the bottom, Walnut along the right-hand side. Again, the parking ramp on the left side of the building here. I'm not going to get into the detail of the program. I just wanted to kind of show the overall layouts here of the building. The 2nd level here, we come up our parking ramp. We have 96 total parking stalls here for 2 levels of parking. Oops. And then we get up to the 4th and 5th floor, which we have a kind of expansive footprint around the perimeter of the building. We also create this patio courtyard space. As I mentioned, the hotel requirements would want to see a hotel that's developed with a minimum of 100 rooms, and they want to see one-to-one parking with that. So we're trying to come as close as possible to meet those requirements. Otherwise, they don't approve the franchise, and the project doesn't go further into development. So we actually have 112 rooms as proposed here on the project. This is the 6th and 7th floor. We have a more compressed floor plate here. And so with that, there also are minimum ceiling requirements that the hotel franchise would require. And we have the main level lobby, typically that is in this particular hotel brand, which is the Element Hotel, requires 16 to 18 foot minimum ceiling. They like to see 2-story volume. We got creative and we're able to give them a portion of 2-story volume, which you can see on the right-hand corner of the building, and then allow us to try to compress the rest of the ceiling height to a more manageable height. And then each of the hotel floors would have their own minimum requirements as well. And so we've designed that to the minimum, as well as the parking level, knowing that you can get shorter ceilings in a parking garage, but you also have challenges where you're dealing with really deep structural members, and how can you make all that work with, keeping the building height at the minimum level. So the end product here results in that height of 82.5 feet in this case. So again, the property is zoned for this use, to develop this use because of the footprint of the site, to meet the minimum program requirements. That's where the application for the variance comes in then. So I'm going to move on to the view corridor study. And What you can see here is there's a red box with a green location that says site, so that's 3rd and Walnut. We have the Capitol off to the right-hand side. We've got a variety of views that we've taken different vantage points from the street level, as well as we've zoomed in on this enlarged plan here that show some other views from, for example, directly across the street at the City Square Apartments, for what would happen if there's development on the site across the street from them. Backing up here, though, I just want to call attention that the buildings that are highlighted in red are buildings that currently exceed the 75 feet. As Bert mentioned, the Embassy Suites predates the current city ordinance. Although the E300 building here, this one currently is about 85 feet. That's 2 blocks north of our site here. We've got there's an existing courthouse building, and then we've got a state building close to the Capitol as well. So this is a view taken across the river, and we're pointing to the general direction of where the Capitol is located. We can see that there's primarily an obstructed view from Court Avenue and Water Street here. As we start heading down Locust Street, you can see that the Capitol is on access with the street, and there's heavily preserved views all the way down Locust Street as a result of that, with Locust also being the main thoroughfare entrance into the historic East Village neighborhood. As we come closer, you can see off to the right, we've got a representation of the hotel, which is obviously far enough away from the main view corridor down Locust, which still has clear unobstructed view of the Capitol. As we jump then across to Walnut Street, the Embassy Suites Hotel, which is approximately 100 feet tall, is located on the left-hand side here. We can see that the City Square Lofts building, which is about 75 feet tall, has already compromised the view of the Capitol as you're progressing down Walnut. As we get closer to the site, we're showing here just kind of a representation of that height of 75 feet, and we can see that right as we get about a block away, the Capitol does come into view, and that the building as proposed does start to obstruct that view. It should also be noted that the city ordinance has a minimum requirement for new development to have a minimum of 3 stories for commercial buildings, and so any particular development that would go at this location at the street level would therefore start obstructing the views as well, whether it's a 3-story, 5-story, or in this case 7-story building. As we get past the site, or adjacent to the site rather, you can see that there largely are taller buildings further down Walnut that continue to obstruct the views. And now as we take a step back here, Bert had a similar vantage point from the site photos that they had taken. We wanted to show a representation of what does the 75-foot tall building look like in comparison to the building as proposed at 82.5 feet. So you can see on the right-hand side, we've got partial views of the Capitol from this perspective. The 7.5-foot additional height for the proposed hotel really doesn't come into play with that additional height in terms of the vantage point from this particular angle. And you can see that it's, from the eye, it's almost tough to see that there is, in fact, any additional height present. As we get a little closer, you can see that, again, imagine there's a 3-story building here, that whatever you develop on site across the street from the City Square Apartments is essentially going to start obstructing that view. Again, the additional height here, in our opinion, becomes not so noticeable. Where you do start to notice a little differentiation is when you take the vantage point from an elevated perspective. Here we are at the 4th floor of the City Square Lofts apartment. Developing a 55-foot building would compromise the views from that floor. It's a 7-story building, so we've got 3 stories above that we would want to take into consideration as well. And so as we look at it says 6th floor, but that's in error. This is actually from the 7th floor here. You can see that a 75-foot tall building from the top floor of the building largely is going to obstruct and compromise that view as well, similar to if you had an 82.5-foot building constructed in lieu of that. This graphic here, the blue areas indicate where you have clear view corridors, and you can see at our site there are some views that are present as you come down Walnut because there is just a parking lot there. Once you start to develop anything, then those views start to get compromised, as I mentioned, and really the main view corridor is through Locust as you progress through the city. So I just wanted to kind of power through that. I know we're short on time here, and I know we'll have an opportunity to connect on some concluding thoughts as well. But again, we just wanted to make note that the views are clearly heavily obstructed already in the area, and that our opinion is the additional height doesn't play a huge factor into that. The development of a 75-foot tall building versus an 82.5-foot tall building would be similar in comparison. And we hope that the detailed view corridor analysis helps explain that clearly to the members of the board, and that would be something to consider to support the project, which we think would develop a Class A project for the historic East Village neighborhood, and be an asset to the area. So thank you.
Questions for Jesse?
Why could you not do 75 feet compared to, why do you have to do 82.5?
Thank you for asking. So let's just say, for example, we want to reduce height. So how do we do that? We either have to compress the ceilings to a point which, there are bare minimums that ceilings are required per code. Even if we did that, we would be hard pressed to get to that point. So then you're left with, what can you take out of the building to reduce the height? And so we have the bare minimum for number of hotel rooms and the hotel amenity spaces, where if you take one floor off the building, now the franchise can't support the development of it because there are economics that don't lend itself to that, and it's about the guest experience as well for the hotel brand. So if you were to say reduce parking, let's say we take out one of the parking levels and then we can reduce height of the building. Well, now you're not able to accomplish that 1-to-1 requirement for the hotel rooms versus the parking stalls, and the franchise would not be agreeable to, obviously there's other parking in the area, but they would not support having parking off-site to support the project.
Just so you're thinking, you have 7 stories, you have a 2-story entry, 2 stories for the parking and 2 stories for the rooms. Where do we get 7? Where's this, is the extra story just extra square or headroom that you need or whatever?
So there's the main floor is public space and retail, and so that is a 1-story level. You have 2 levels of parking above that, so that now you're up to floor 3, and then you have 4 levels of hotel space above that.
I'm just I thought there were 50 rooms. Okay.
Jesse, you're raising the bar for quality of presentation. I doubt whether a lot of our follow applicants will have as good a graphics. If they do, this will be great, but that's not required. But I really like how you presented this. It makes it very clear. But a question I've gotten, I might know the answer to this. So since this Capitol View overlay district has been here for a long time, and 55 foot is the limit, and your client has certain requirements as a franchise, then why not just locate this project in a zoning district where you can easily build as tall as you need to meet the requirements of your client?
Yeah, I guess I don't have the specifics of that, but I would assume because the client is an experienced hotel developer that he's looked at all properties in the area, right, and that this is the one that would lend itself to being developed. And so it's I think it's a natural location given the area, the neighborhood. So there's the historic East Village neighborhood is a prime location, and there's a lot of great recent development in that area, and a lot of it is going more vertical. I think that's a trend that we're seeing. I think that there's probably an apprehension of saying, do we want to support something going taller, and who's going to be the next guy to ask that? We're seeing that the view corridor study is the piece that comes into play, and obviously if other proposals in the future would compromise that, then it makes it easier to not support that. So we thought that this data was helpful and exhibited
Sure.
that.
So it basically comes down to the old phrase, location, location, location.
Sure.
It's not just they want to build in Des Moines or build near downtown. They want to be in the East Village.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And then therefore, being in the East Village, we have these district requirements, and we have smaller sites, and we're doing infill development, so all those present challenges, right? Okay, all right. Okay, any other questions anybody's got for Jesse? Okay, thank you, sir. You can
Thank
sit
you.
down for a few minutes. We'll see, first of all, is there anybody here in support of the applicant? You'd have up to 5 minutes if you want to make any comments in support. Okay, seeing none, is there anybody here in opposition to the applicant? Okay, step on up. Good afternoon, welcome. And how this part of the process works, you've got up to 5 minutes, and we just need you to lead off with your name and address.
My name is Bill Dicus. I live at 9840 Carpenter Avenue in Clive. I'm not exactly opposed to the project, but I wanted to speak to you from the point of view of the Capital Planning Commission, which I chair. Just by way of a little bit of history, I was involved with the restoration of the Capitol from 1981 to 2005 as the restoration architect.
Wow.
We had our architectural office at 3rd and Locust. I'm retired from RDG, Bassard Dicus. And at that time, we were also interior architect for Capitol View when the Embassy Suites was going up. And so at that point, and because I had been involved in several national committees where it had opportunity, sorry, I got a cold, to visit several other state capitals, notably, in particular, the Ohio State Capitol. If you've ever been there, that is a capitol that's completely surrounded by high-rises. So with all of those factors in mind, I began to propose a Capitol View protection to the city in the early 80s, I would say. And it took several years to get that accomplished, but working off and on with Rick Clark and I think Matt Anderson later, we were finally able to get that done. And so my major interest is in protecting the integrity of the capital dominance districts. And so I would just ask you if you, we agree with the staff report, we're comfortable with that, but I would ask if the board decides to go with the variance that's requested, that you make it clear that it would not be deemed to be a precedent, shouldn't be considered a precedent. We'd appreciate that if you would include that in your motion if you decide to go in that direction. So that's all I have for comments. Thank you.
Bill, you could probably tell us a lot more with all your experience, but I want to thank you for coming down, sharing your comments. Anybody else here to speak in opposition? Step on up.
Hi, my name is Erin Strom, and my address is 210 East Walnut Street, apartment 722 in Des Moines. I'm a resident of City Square Lofts. My family and I moved in there just about 2 months ago, sold house up in Ankeny, wanted to move into downtown Des Moines to enjoy all that the city has to offer. We've got young kids, 13, 11, and 8. We specifically chose the City Square building because of the gorgeous view of the Capitol. the building markets the Capitol view. Actually, when you go on and search apartments in that building, you can search by the view. You can search by the number of floors in your unit. You can search by the number of bedrooms. So this is something that is, it's a really big part of the quality of life. The roof of the parking garage has a common area on it where, I wish I had a photo with me. The view of the Capitol is spectacular. Our unit in particular, as I said, when we decided to move downtown, a big part of our decision to move into this building and this apartment and into the East Village was because of the view of the Capitol. The way that the building heights are designed in the Capitol Overlayment District, there is a specific preference given to residential buildings with that building height of 75 feet versus commercial buildings which have a height of 55 feet. So, it seems to me that dropping a large commercial building right in front of a residential building sort of flies in the face of the intent of that difference in the building height. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you very much for all you do.
Very good comments, and we appreciate you living in the city of Des Moines and where you're at in East Village, so thank you. Anybody else here to speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, before we go back to the applicant, any further questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. Jesse, you can have up to 3 minutes if you want to have any closing comments or remarks, since a couple people did speak in opposition. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you'd like to come up, that's fine.
I guess I'll just reiterate our main point that, again, the property was zoned for hotel use, and we felt that given the recent development in the area that does seem to support more vertical design, and given what we think is an efficient approach to kind of putting a complicated little project or into a small site there, that having the ability to have this property developed as it's zoned for that use, that we be given an opportunity to do that. So we definitely have challenged to try to minimize the heights, and hope that it's recognized that any potential development on that property is going to be a challenge for Capitol views as well as views for the adjacent buildings there. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jesse. Okay, I will close public portion and go to board deliberation. So, thoughts or comments?
Trying to figure out where the city square lofts are in comparison to that site.
It'd be just to the west. There's the large red
Okay,
block. So
okay.
so that's where Erin Strom lives. Yep.
See the roof of it right here?
Okay.
There's a parking garage in the middle.
Okay. Yep. Gotcha. Does that help, Cindy? Okay.
It was a very insightful of you with the viewpoints, where you're going. And I think if you put up any building on that lot, you're going to obstruct some of the viewpoints, especially from some of the people in the city lofts in the first couple floors. So it'll be a nice brand to bring into Des Moines, bring in some nice tax base, provides for some retail. It's really hard to say. We're talking about 7.5 feet over what the variance was, or exception. I get confused. But I thought that the viewpoint things was very interesting, and there is not a great deal of difference, I think. But that's what other people's thoughts are.
It seems pretty straightforward. It's not going to work if he can't have it 82.5 feet, because he's got to have that number of rooms to generate the revenue, and he's got to have, there's certain requirements that the flag has based on parking and the number of rooms. So I think we're challenged with today is this project won't happen if he can't have the variance.
Right.
And for 7.5 feet, I think we're gonna be met with all kinds of challenges, and I certainly understand where Bill's coming from, that this wouldn't set precedent. I think all these projects have to stand on their own 2 feet. And with what's going on downtown, there certainly has been studies that have said that we need more hotel rooms. And here we've got somebody that's coming in that wants to do a project, and we're not gonna make everybody happy. We've certainly got some hard decisions to make, but I think it makes perfect sense to me. And it seems very straightforward as to why they need to do what they're gonna do. And they have gone through, and it sounds like they've gotten Marriott and some of those requirements relaxed a little bit in order to accommodate some of the concerns. But I don't think we're ever gonna get it 100%.
And the opposing of that is that then there may be people that will not buy into living downtown because of that.
And there can't be that many of those instances based on this project.
I don't know.
And I think people that want to live downtown, there's a lot of things that they're willing to move downtown for.
And that'd be
So,
just like-
and here again, I don't think we can make everybody happy. So I'm empathetic to all that. But this is a project that the only way it's going to work is it's got to be this height.
Okay, other thoughts? I might just weigh in or base off what Dave just mentioned. And I appreciate Jesse's presentation. He's straight on, very clear. But he's saying, just like Dave said, yep, project probably won't work. But that doesn't mean somebody else's project for other commercial use can't work and either work within the requirements of the existing zoning ordinance for height. What we've got here, even at an exception level, even with staff agreeing, that would add 20 more feet to the building. That's 40% greater in height above the existing 55 that's limited. Now we want to make it 82.5 feet. We're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater for the intent of the overlay district. And I heard a lot of things mentioned about, well, anything's going to obstruct the Capitol. Well, a street light pole could theoretically block my view of the Capitol if I stand just right, or a one-story building, I'm less than 6 foot tall, could block my view of the Capitol. But what we're talking about is not any obstruction, but an excessive obstruction in height. And I think when we get to the point that we're at variance request level, we got to have a really darn good reason of why we're granting a variance to the ordinance. Staff's probably going out on a limb granting the exception here. I get exactly what Jesse's doing. He's worth every dime he's being paid by his employer here as a consultant. But at the end of the day, I always work from the base principle and then how does this fit into it? And I think that Bill was very clear in what the intent was when that ordinance was passed, what that's designed to do. If we have a bunch of 80, 90, 100 foot buildings around here someday, precedent or not, we've really thrown the intent of that community-based ordinance out the window. And I do agree to an extent with what Erin said. You know, it should not impair or diminish established property values in surrounding areas. If I buy a white line loft and expect a view of Principal Park Sec Taylor and then somebody builds, that's going to impair that value. Certainly it's going to impair the value of that property if, yeah, I should have been up high enough. A building shouldn't be normally over 55 foot, now it is. The same thing, harmony with the essential character of the neighborhood. The character is preserve the Capitol view as much as possible, but one could say that now city view, that's already there, that was in the requirements, this is not in harmony with that essential established character. So I got a concern about giving away the farm on an excessive height allowance on this property. It's kind of like you should know what you're getting into. I know it's a small property, but we know what the ordinance is from square one. And getting even to an exception level, that's 40% more height for the structure than what the code allows. So that's just my counterpoint on this one here. I do want growth in the East Village. We have lots of growth. I'm sure we'll continue to have growth, but it's got to be managed within the general guidelines of our ordinance. However, if anybody's got a motion they want to entertain, Could be a staff rec, it could be granting the full variance requested, and we can go from there.
Move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can you do that? Street's not coming across at all.
Marlis, yeah.
Doesn't have the right mic.
I think that's mine.
Okay, well, you can have it if you
Okay.
want.
I move that we approve the staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a second on that?
I'll second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2. Okay, that motion fails. All those opposed? Okay. So, the motion to grant staff recommendation fails. So at this stage, we can still consider alternative motions. Okay, is there an alternative motion?
To grant the variance request.
Okay,
Second that.
And place, if we need to add to it the wording of it, that this is a one-time,
Well, this doesn't establish
Exception.
precedent.
well, no.
That doesn't
no.
set a precedent.
I understand what Bill was trying to say,
Yeah.
but yeah, a variance or an exception or any decision, it doesn't grant precedent. Each case has its own merits.
If I may,
Yes.
I think, at least as staff and as the attorney for this board, we do look at what the board does as precedential. And so, and we talk about that in virtually every single case. And so I actually appreciated the point that this should not be precedent, and that's why it's so important to us that you develop, for example, the variance test or the exception test, what facts justify granting that in each case.
Sure.
And so it might merit describing why this one is different than the next one that comes along that wants 85 feet.
So if staff wants to, yeah, use any case as a precedent, they can, but it's not in the board's jurisdiction to say, do consider this as precedent or don't consider this as precedent.
No, I guess what I'm saying is if there are things, and I think that Dave may have already said this in his comments, and so you may just
Okay.
want to refer back to that, but things that make this different than the next one, I can tell you,
Are
we have people come in and look at your prior board decisions as precedential to see why they didn't get granted things. So I do think it is important to make that point,
Okay.
if that is what the board chooses to do.
Right. So Dave, based on your motion, you're making that a variance test that there's a hardship on the property based on its size.
Project can't happen without
Right. Okay.
the height requirement that they're asking for. Because they can't generate enough rooms. And if they eliminate parking, then they don't have enough parking places. The flag doesn't let them build.
Okay, all right, so we had a motion by Dave and a second by John. All those in favor of granting the requested variance, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that motion fails as well. So I believe at this stage, we're kind of out of gas as a board.
Yeah, it's, at this stage, you could, I mean, I don't, we can discuss, or you can discuss if there are any alternate motions. There could be a different level of exception, for example, or something like that, or then just no relief is approved.
Okay. Is there any way to go back to look at the exception request and if a board member wants to re-entertain that, can they?
Yes, you can make a motion to reconsider, which would have to be voted on, and then you could, vote again. Or again, like I said, if there's a different, you voted on staff recommendation was an exception of 20
Right.
feet, that could be different. So it could be, I'm not trying to direct what you're doing here, but I'm
Right.
just giving you examples.
That's
of
why I
what you could
asked
do
though for
differently.
clarification.
Well, I think I'll make a motion to at least grant the exception. I mean, at least give them some type of an option than to kill the whole thing altogether. I mean, we're talking 6.5 feet for retail space that's dying in the East Village, and bringing more of that into there and more people down to that area would be helpful, but
Right.
So
that
that would
failed, so.
require a motion to reconsider
Yeah.
with a second vote on that, and then you could vote on that item again.
Okay, John's made a motion to reconsider. Is there a second on that?
I'll second John's
Okay,
motion.
a second from Cindy. All those in favor of reconsidering, raise your right hand and say aye.
No, I'm sorry, what are we voting on?
We're just reconsidering an exception, but we aren't voting on the exception. We're going to reconsider it.
Are you voting on
Okay,
it?
and if you don't want to vote on this, you don't have to at this stage. Okay, all right, so that, we got 5 yeas for reconsideration. Anybody opposed or any abstentions? Okay, 1 abstention. Okay, so we're going to reconsider the exception I think Mr. Chido mentioned that he'd like to reconsider that, at least grant them the exception request,
That's the staff recommendation,
which is the
correct?
staff
Right,
recommendation.
correct.
Okay, so John, do you want to make a motion to approve the staff
I
recommendation?
make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay, all right. So we've got a motion and a second to grant the staff recommendation. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I'm going to vote no, just in principle, but knowing that that will pass. All right, so the motion carries 5-1 to grant the exemption of 20 feet over the maximum 55 feet of height allowed. So Jesse might have to be even more creative than he has been to see if he can make this work. Okay, all right. I thank everybody for your diligence on that and thinking through that one. Okay, so that will move us then to item 12, a variance request at 3205 Southeast 19th Court.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'll pass out some comment cards we got first. The subject property is south of East Park Avenue, which is the east-west street you see here, on a curvilinear street. Southeast 19th Street comes in. And then there's Southeast 19th Court that diverts off of that and then also goes south. So this lot ends up with 2 frontages on 2 public streets. So the way the ordinance reads, they are supposed to have a front yard setback observed on both streets. That includes fencing, structures, and in this case they're proposing a structure be placed at the northeast corner. They also have an existing fence that there's no record of the permit or anything that's a solid fence that would need relief to be kept in place. And I know you're going to point out the fact that there's other fences of similar nature, and there's actually no zoning board of adjustment relief ever granted on this street. So I did the research myself.
So are you saying there's no fences in the other yards? Is that?
There is fences in the other yards. I'm just saying they are also potentially needing relief at this point. So if you're trying to make that observation that that's an existing character or something, just know that there's no relief for those existing fences either. How about that? So this is the dwelling. It's on the property, the front yard. You can see the solid fences starting behind the back or behind the side yards of the house. Because of the sun, I tried to do the best to get this to be somewhat visible. Maybe Bert can open up the iris, I don't know, to make it a little lighter.
So everybody's got fences along that
Well,
street?
there's three properties that have fences along East Park there, correct. They have an existing structure that's right here that I believe they would be, it's like a carport kind of canopy, like one of those that we've dealt with in the past, with just kind of 4 poles and a metal roof. This is the solid structure that they're proposing, and they're wanting to push it clear to a 0-foot situation at the East Park. Still inside the fence, wanting to retain the fence itself. They did give us a photo of what they're proposing here, and I'll show that to you too.
Can you point out here where the fences are now? Are they all where that dashed line is?
Yeah, let's go back to the aerial and you can see
Sorry,
that probably
I'm
easier.
just
There's some
trying to
shadow
figure it
that makes it.
Okay.
And again, I'm just pointing out because I know we're sitting here looking at this property and there's other ones that perhaps will need some relief to be able to retain their fences as well. So you can see shadows of fencing right here and right here.
Well, that's only if there's a complaint or you go out and do enforcement.
Well, so, yes, so it's a possibility that will generate a violation, yes.
Right on the
But I wanted
law.
to say that there's no standing for those to be in existence as a comparison for the character.
Sure, sure.
This is the unit that they want to place in that location that was on the sketch right here. So that's an example of what they would be placing in that location if they were granted the relief. I'm going to show you the comment card location. So the objection was in this area down at the bottom. So staff was not able to find that they were able to demonstrate a variance test for an unnecessary hardship. It would be practical difficulty they're faced with because of the unique shapes of the lot and the setback situation with two frontages presents an unusual condition to try to achieve what they're doing. So we do think that they meet the test of the exception level appeal, which would let them go as close as 15 feet to the setback. Again, this is a 30-foot setback measured along here because there's nothing to average this with on this frontage because all of these homes are beyond the midpoint of the property that you would base that on. So the calculation ends up being an average of all of them being assigned a 30-foot setback. So the average, if you use the average calculation, it would be 30 anyway. So they end up having to meet a 15-foot if they got an exception relief. That would require them to pull the fence back 15 feet from the property line and then place the shed as well in that location. This is showing 30 feet, so if you can sort of get a sense of where half of that would be. We're talking about a line right in this area as to how far back that would be set if they were granted an exception. If they are granted the exception, we do want that to be subject to any accessory structure complying with building codes and getting necessary permits. And then we want to make sure that they do pull a fence permit for any alteration, whether it's left in place with a variance or shifted based on a exception level appeal. So, so that they do have the proper fence permit.
How did this come to you?
I'm not sure.
Good question.
I don't believe it's a violation. I don't think it came as a violation. I think they wanted to get a permit for their building, but they can answer that.
Right. And the building size would have required a permit at this
Yes,
stage.
it's a little bit bigger than the one that we would just allow without a permit.
Right, which is what,
So it does-
120 square feet, 10 by 12,
It
basically?
does need to be anchored properly and meet code and that kind of
Okay.
thing.
Eric, in comparison, let's take the shed out of the consideration for a minute. If there wasn't a fence in the backyard on that, I know it's considered the front yard, but if there wasn't a fence along their Park Avenue boundary and they wanted to build one from scratch, within the regulations, they could build a 4-foot tall opaque solid fence, wooden fence.
Yeah, they could build a 3-foot.
On that frontage.
A 3-foot
Or
tall.
three.
Yeah, they
Okay,
could have a
they could build a
4-foot
3-foot.
chain link open
Okay.
fence or
Right.
other style of open fence.
Okay, so they could have a 3-foot opaque, but in essence, what they're asking for is twice that height to have a
Right.
6-foot opaque fence.
Yeah, and again, I apologize, it's hard to see in the
Sure.
photo.
Sure. I get it.
This
I
is
get it.
definitely at least a 6-foot fence.
Right.
Yeah. Based on what we know about standard materials and things, that would be the height of
Okay.
it. So.
All right.
Yes, and one of the things you have to consider is whether some future owner would remove a fence. So if you put the building up that close, that would be an impact that
Sure.
would have to be considered
And
too.
we have no city sidewalk on that south side of the street, is that correct?
I don't think so. Oh, I guess there is, yeah.
Okay, so there
Looks like
is.
sidewalk
Okay.
on both sides, yeah.
All right, I got you.
And let's see in the foreground if I got that in. It's hard to tell again from the shadow. right here.
Yeah, we just got a pretty wide right-of-way in there. That's why I was confused. I thought, well, it doesn't even look like a sidewalk.
Yeah,
Okay,
I believe that Park is a wider right-of-way than the typical
Right.
residential street
Okay.
width, so.
all right. Any other questions for Eric? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, applicant, you're up. Good afternoon, welcome.
Hi, my name's Connor Sultan. I live at 3205 Southeast 19th Court. If I would have known my fence was even illegal, I probably wouldn't have asked for this. We just bought the property in August. When I went to pull a building permit for this carport, I found out that we had the 30-foot variance law. I did not know that there wasn't a permit for the carport or the fencing prior to me owning the building. We have since pulled the carport down. We have not pulled the fence down. I have 2 dogs. That is one of the main reasons why I bought the property, and we love how big the backyard was. The 30-foot for the kind of 15-foot would cut our property in half and probably actually make what we just paid for the property downsize, because we can only have technically, according to law, 30-foot, which is pretty much off of our back deck. For the 15-foot, it would cut our backyard in half. And then we were okay with the shed being 15 foot away from the fence. That actually does work still. The 30-foot would put it right at our patio that is in place and would make it unusable at that point. But pretty much, I guess I kind of walked into a lot of problems and I didn't know it. And
Sure.
I guess if our fence doesn't pass, we're going to have some very upset neighbors too. So, yeah, I guess it's just, we're just trying to get a carport, a shed back there, because our garage is a very small 2-stall garage. So we needed something to store our tools and lawnmowers and whatnot. So.
All right, questions for Cassandra? So did I hear that you'd be okay with the staff recommendation to maybe pull the shed back 15 feet?
Yeah, but not the fence.
Right, but not the fence. And if we did look at your shed, yeah, if it was up against the fence, that shed would be taller than the fence,
Yeah.
right? So it would kind of stick out, it would be close to the property line.
yeah.
So you're saying that you'd be okay pulling it back 15 feet?
Yep.
And that can still be your 20-foot in length and still fit in the backyard, okay?
Yep.
But you'd like to keep the fence
Yeah.
as it sits and the height that it is?
Yes.
Okay, I got you.
I'm just curious, what did they say about the fence when you were buying the house? Was it on the,
I was told nothing. We did get an inspector in there, and we did not know that our fence or our carport were illegal.
okay, the seller's disclosure didn't disclose it was done without a permit?
No. And I don't know, they only owned the property for about 2 years, so it could have been put in previously.
Okay.
I think that fence has been there for about 18 years.
Yeah.
If I remember right, because I lived 2 blocks away from there, and I remember when that fence was built, and it was, I think, 2000, around that time.
Yeah, often the developers
doubt.
will put them up to sell the houses because he wants to back up to a busy street.
Aha. Okay, all right, any other questions for Cassandra? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, go South Dakota State. Anybody else here to speak in support of the applicant? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, do we have any further questions for staff? I don't see any, but Eric, is there anything you want to share?
I would just say it's not unusual for, fences going up without permits in this city.
Right, it does happen.
So
Yes.
you probably understand that as the board, so it's very normal for several owners to own a property and,
Right.
this wouldn't come up through disclosure.
But if you want to build a fence today, check with zoning and the Permit Development Center.
I guess
That's your
if you're
public service message.
if you're inclined to find that was not of their own making or something of that nature, you may put a stipulation that it would be, if it's ever removed, that it wouldn't be placed back again without further consideration. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with that in mind, I don't think there's anything there too counterintuitive. So we'll go ahead, close public portion, go to board deliberation.
I'd like to move, and I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but that the fence can stay where it is,
Yep.
and that the shed would be pulled in 15 feet.
Okay.
because I think that still makes sense, makes it a little closer to the house. But I understand the fencing there for the neighbors, because East Park's a very busy street. And I would hate to have it's an odd situation that there's 2 front yards. You know, that's,
Right.
not everybody would even think through that or know that. So I don't know how to make that into a motion, but that's what I would like to see happen.
Well, like Cindy, I'd like your motion would be then to approve staff recommendation with amendment to allow the fence to stay with where it's at, unless it was down or forced down. It could
Yeah,
be
maybe
raised
with
up.
the
That's what it says
caveat,
in
if something
staff
were
is
to
it-
change, that they would need to come back, or to obtain a fence permit, which would then
Right.
put it where it,
That's what staff recommendation is.
okay.
Yeah.
If you read it, it says,
So the staff recommendation, I actually kind of wanted Bert's input too, but here is my suggestion, or my thought. I'm gonna talk through this with you guys. I think you would still have to approve a variance,
Yes.
in order to keep the fence where it is.
Yes.
But as conditions of that variance, it could clarify, oh, I'm sorry, Eric, rather than Bert. It could clarify that the shed is to be placed at 15 feet. You know, it cannot go past 15 feet into that variance, and nor can anything else. And that if the fence is removed or damaged greater than 50%, that it needs to be, then variance would expire, basically, or be null.
If we would choose to do that, we might just say, well, we're granting the variance permanent, and if you want to repair your fence and put it back the way it was, you can leave it.
If you would choose to do that. Now,
Yeah, if we would choose to do
I
that.
think that she still has to come in and get a fence permit currently. I mean, that would not be, this
Right.
action doesn't waive
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But it would be issued based on if you granted the variance or not. And did I miss anything? Should we add anything?
Yeah, I guess the only thing the way I'm hearing it is it might be broken into 2 things, because the shed is of their own making
Right.
and the fence is something that they inherited when they acquired the property.
Well, we'd be looking at granting an exception for the shed and a variance for the fence.
I'm just not sure that's how the relief would work. It's to
Can
the
we?
setback rather than to the
Yeah, so the
object.
setback is the relief being granted. It's to allow a fence and a shed.
Right, and
So-
so it's as to the setback.
Yeah, so
rather
you
than
would be
as to
adding
a
a-
specific object, but a condition of the variance could be the shed has to be 15 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've
Or
got-
it cannot go further.
And so
than
the
50 feet.
condition that you place on it will be mitigating the relief of the
Wow,
variance.
you're making us think really hard here.
But you're
still
So would
yeah,
these
you're
be
still
2
making a-
separate actions?
No, that's
No.
what I'm saying.
Okay.
See, if you look on your,
Okay.
if you look
So
on
it'd
your
be
agenda.
granting a variance first.
If you look on your agenda, it's
Yep.
just the variance, and that's why, because it's as to the setback and not
Okay.
as to the object.
It's
Okay.
they both have to meet the same setback, so
Okay,
you want, as a condition, to
right.
follow the criteria of the granting of
Okay.
the variance. You want to make a condition that the shed be placed
Right.
15
Okay,
feet.
I think we can get there. But what I want to make sure, so if we close public portion now and go to board deliberation then. So I think this has kind of been tossed out here now, so is everybody kind of thinking on the same lines here? From my perspective, John, you lived in the area, I almost bought the house, the second one in on Southeast 19th. It got taken away by somebody else. This is one of the nicest neighborhoods in that area of town. And I think everybody's tried hard to keep up their properties, and I hope you're doing the same thing as the new owner. Excellent, that's great. But Park Avenue does present some concerns. It's a busy street, it can be a noisy street. The right-of-way is pretty wide there. While we can't use that as an excuse for not having setbacks, I think visually it presents a setback that the fence is set back further away from the curb and the roadway than it normally would. So I'm going to throw out here, I think we kind of, Cindy, you kind of had your motion, but I'll go ahead and second it to, in essence, grant a variance of 30 feet less than the minimum required 30-foot front yard setback. The variance reasoning is, or to allow the retention of the existing fence, wooden fence. In the future, if the fence needs replacement or repair, it can be reconstructed, must meet building permits, but could be reconstructed to no more than the current height that it currently is. So I don't know if that's 6 or 6.5 or what. but
Height and placement?
Height and location for placement of where it is. And along with this variance, then they'd be allowed to have the shed no closer than 15 foot from that north property line. Reasoning for that variance would be, this is not contrary to the public interest, the way the plat was developed for this area, as evidenced by your parcel and those neighboring. The intent was, that was the backyard, although the literal enforcement of the regulations is, it's also a front yard, but that literal enforcement would result in an unnecessary hardship, because you didn't put it there and you didn't cause it. It's unique circumstances, not specifically related to you, but the land in question as it sits. And you'd still be in harmony with the essential character of the neighborhood.
Would those conditions be added to the 2 conditions already stated on page 43 of your staff recommendations?
Since you're so good on that, any accessory structure must still apply with applicable building codes for your shed. Fence and alteration shall be in accordance with the fence permit approved by the city's permit and development center. So yeah, those 2 conditions would still apply. So if that's a second and if that's clear, so then we've got our motion out there. All those in favor to grant the requested variance, subject to staff, or subject to the conditions, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-0. Okay. All right. And we'll leave it up to staff if they're going to continue to visit that area or not. I don't know. Okay. That'll bring us then to item 13, a conditional use permit request at 500 East Locust Street.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 13 is a conditional use permit that would allow for use of the ground floor of the teach-out building for a tavern use. It would actually be an expansion of the existing bar in the basement known as Up Down. It's like an arcade bar. So it'd be expanding onto the ground floor of the teach-out building.
And Bert, since we're going to have a lot of directional things in this one, ground floor,
Sure.
underground, basement, lower, ground floor meaning first floor or
Street
the
level.
main street
Yeah,
level?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, so back in 2008, they were given the conditional use permit to use the basement of the structure for a tavern. Now they're wanting to expand into the street level. Again, this teach-out building is at the northeast corner of East Locust Street and East 5th Street. Here's the floor plan that they submitted. I put north at the top. You can see that ground level would have the bar and then some tables. I believe the arcade might be at the back and then in the basement as well. You can see that they're putting a stairwell here in the building that would head down to the basement. They're not proposing any outdoor seating areas, which, you know, in East Village, if they were proposing any outdoor seating areas, we'd probably have conditions regarding sound, but since that's not on the table, we don't need to worry about that. Here's a picture of the building. You can see they've already papered over the windows on the ground floor of the building in anticipation of this project. This is looking down 5th Street, East 5th Street. You can see that there's a stairwell here that leads to the basement. This stairwell is allowed in the right-of-way in accordance with a sidewalk cafe lease. So we've just recommended a condition of approval of this be that they maintain that lease in good standing with the city. Here's the police reports. There's nothing really that jumps out for this property in the past year. And then the consent map, we got some cards in support and opposition, some from the Soho lofts here to the to the west, and then the lofts to the south as well. So staff believes that this is an appropriate location for the tavern use. Again, as I mentioned, there's no outdoor seating areas, so we didn't have to worry about that. We have recommended approval subject to a list of 9 conditions. I won't go through all of those, but the most important one is number 9, which says that if the tavern becomes a nuisance, the zoning officer has the ability to bring it back to the board for further study. So, any questions?
Any questions by the board? Okay, all right. Thank you, Bert. Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant? I think we've seen this guy before.
Chairman, members of the board, my name is Lloyd Ogle, attorney for the applicant, 301 East Walnut Street, Suite 2, Des Moines. The Uptown Enterprises, this is the original site of the original Uptown business. It features 80s vintage arcade games and basically it's a combination of arcades and bars. It's proved to be a very successful business model. They've expanded and have businesses now in Kansas City, Minneapolis, Milwaukee. They are soon to open one in St. Louis. This ownership group is 3 young gentlemen, also own Woolies, which is right next door. The build-outs they do on these businesses are extensive. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this build-out. This one would, I would guess, roughly will reach $300,000. They employ architects. These are very, very nice establishments that they put together. And what's happened now is you go to these other cities and you see these big multi-story bar arcades, and then people want to come back and see the original one in Des Moines, and they come to this single room basement, and it's quite a contrast. So these guys are all from here, and they want to reinvest back in their community. They're projected to have probably roughly 300 employees by the spring, and they run good businesses. They care about their neighborhoods that they live in, and these are the kind of entrepreneurs and businessmen that we need to, our community needs to be supporting. Would be glad to answer any questions. Would mention they are sensitive to the historic nature of this building, and they've employed architects that both have a background in historic structures and are familiar with them, and they're very sensitive. And the owner of the building, Teach Out Properties, obviously is also very concerned that the historic character of the building and the neighborhood is retained as they do this.
I think it's a great thing they have going there. I've been in there when it was original, when the basement there. I think it's a great project, and it's great for that location, great for the city.
What are the hours of operation and the days of operation there?
I maybe ask them to go ahead and comment on the hours. Most days 5 to 2.
As in 5 p.m. to 2 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Lloyd, could you throw the little floor plan architectural drawing back up on the camera there? Or have Bert help you put that up? I just had a couple of questions on that. It looks like the layout of this would be more akin to like a lounge tavern rather than, I don't see a big dance floor here.
Yeah, there's no dance floor in any of these establishments. There wouldn't be one here. I mean, the key thing is that by opening up the floor, like there are other up downs, it actually creates a multi-story experience.
Okay.
And opens it up.
And again, I get the basics of the drawing here, but the ingress, egress doors, are there either foyers or secondary doors or a little interior hallway to get in and out?
There's two ways in. One is approximately right here.
And that's on East Fifth, right?
Yeah, and then you could access the street level and the basement through those doors, and then through the exteriors here you can access the basement through these exterior stairs.
Right, but for if I wanted to walk in on the first floor of what you're proposing here,
you'd come in this door here.
Yeah, okay. If I wanted to come in on Locust, could I do that as well?
Yeah, well, you'd come in through Locust, you go downstairs to the basement level, and
then come back up. So kind of what I'm getting at is you aren't going to have a door popping out onto Locust with loud noise and people falling out of the front door of that.
I'm going to ask one of our architects to address it.
Yeah, maybe on the East Fifth side you might.
I'm Jeff Wagner, 2006 38th Street, and I'm the architect on it.
Okay.
There are two entry doors. There's one off of Locust, which goes through the existing vestibule.
The vestibule, okay.
And then the door, they can either go through the original doorway or continue on into this location.
Got it.
When they come in through the vestibule, they can enter to go downstairs or
Okay.
go to the first floor.
Okay.
Entry off of East Fifth, they can either go down the staircase into the basement, or they can enter through this door, which goes directly into the space.
Oh, okay, so the East Fifth door doesn't have a vestibule, just be a door in or out.
Correct.
But I'm guessing your primary entrance is going to be on
That is
the
correct.
Locust
And
side.
that East Fifth door is actually an existing door that's currently there.
Right, okay, all right. So we've got a vestibule there on Locust, and
Yes.
I'm just kind of looking at ways to kind of partition or muffle some of the sound and activity as people are coming and going. It sounds like you'd have that.
Yes.
What's the general capacity that you're thinking for that floor level for amount of patrons?
Floor level, we have calculated out at 83
Okay,
on the main
83
level.
people. Okay, so
Yes.
it's not a big dance club or anything
No, it
like
is
that?
not.
Okay, it's more like a lounge setting?
It's like a sports bar,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, gentlemen, much appreciated. Okay, anybody here to speak in support of the applicant?
Hello, I'm J.C. Wilson. Live in Beaverdale, but I own a building at 525 East Grand in the East Village. And one thing I like to do, a fun night for me, is the East Village stroll, I call it. So with this stroll, it puts me into the up-down occasionally. And having moved into the neighborhood early 2005, I've seen a lot going on there, so I got to see the beginnings of even that space. And I just wanted to speak today to the professionalism and the care that the staff and the principals do have at the up-down, and including Woolies too, but yeah, I guess this meeting's about the up-down. So I just encourage you to approve this idea of a expansion of an already great thing that's going on in a great neighborhood. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay, anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Going once, going twice. Seeing none, any further questions for staff? Okay, if none, we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion and a second to grant the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-0. Keep up the good work in the East Village, guys. And John and I really like it because we played these games the first time in the late 80s, early 90s, right? Not trying to say how young or old anybody is in this room. Okay, that'll bring us to item 14, a variance and exception request at 4608 East, or 4608 Euclid.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 14 is a request that would allow for construction of an addition onto the west side of a house that would be within 3 feet of the side property line and within 23 feet of the south property line. The subject property is a flag lot on the south side of Euclid Avenue, just to the west of Beaver Avenue. When you drive by, you don't even notice that it's back here. There's a driveway here. It's an existing house here with a detached garage. They're wanting to add on to that west side of the house so that it would be within 3 feet of that side property line. This gives you a better idea. Again, here's the property, the house, and then the detached garage. So the addition would be within 3 feet of the side property line and within 23 feet of the rear property line. This is the view down the driveway from Euclid Avenue. You can see the detached garage, the single-family house. And then I went over to 47th Street and got this photo. You can see the house right here. I believe it's the applicant's fence here. So it would be, the addition would be about 3 feet behind that fence. And then here's the consent map, 2 cards in opposition, 1 in support. Again, they needed a variance to the setback, since they're proposing a 3-foot setback where a 7-foot setback was required. As you know, the variance requires the demonstration of an unnecessary hardship. We didn't feel that it met that in this case because it could continue to be used as a single-family property without the addition. However, we did feel that it met the test for practical difficulty, which would allow the board to grant the maximum exception of 3.5 feet less than the required 7-foot setback. So that would require them to trim half a foot off the width of the addition. So staff has recommended approval of an amended appeal for an exception of 3.5 feet less than the required 7-foot side yard setback, as well as the requested exceptions of 8 feet less than the minimum required 15 feet of total side yard, and an exception of 7 feet less than the minimum required 30-foot rear yard setback. So, any questions for me?
So instead of 4 feet, you're recommending 3.5 feet.
3.5, yeah.
And the only reason you're being persnickety over 6 inches is to keep it in the exception level?
To keep it in the exception
Okay.
level, right?
Okay. All right. So then that would still result in a net 3.5 feet between the side of the building and the property line, is that
Right,
right?
yeah, and then they have an existing 5-foot east property line, so that would still leave them with 8.5 feet of total side yard, which technically would only require the exception of 6.5 less than 15. But
How far could they push into the backyard if they had chosen to make their addition into the backyard?
well, they're required to stay 30 feet from this back property line, and they're
It's
right now
25
23.
already. So there's really no room to do anything back there?
No, so to keep it at the exception level, they would be able to build about
12
8 feet. So they
okay.
would meet the 15-foot setback.
Okay, I got you. All right, anything else for Bert? Okay, thank you, sir. What'd you have for a radius map or a, sorry, I missed
That's
that
right,
one.
2
Okay,
in
there it is.
opposition, 1 in
Okay.
support.
All right. Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant. Thank you for being patient and waiting today. Welcome. You kind of see how this works. We just need you to start off with your name and address.
My name is Mickey Nebick. Address is 4300 Northeast 27.
Okay?
The house is, as you see it, is a very small house. So just like an addition to it. So that's all we want.
Okay. So when we get that close to a property line, how would you look at managing, like, if you're going to have a new roof, how would you manage your stormwater, your rainwater with gutters?
We would add the concrete from the fence line, and then we would put a firewall on that wall. The addition in the house, we would put a firewall just in the case of the fire neighbor or the house.
Right, which would be required by the building permit
By the
anyway.
building permits,
Okay.
yes.
But then you'd channel rainwater away from the property line so
Yes,
that it goes
down.
into your
It
backyard?
goes down, yes.
Okay. Okay. And would your addition provide you what, additional bedroom space or family
It
room
would
or what?
Provide downstairs bedroom and upstairs 1 bedroom and a shower and the bathroom, small bathroom.
So this be a 2-story?
Yep. Because
Addition?
right now is like that. It has a
Yeah.
2-story.
All right. Any questions from anybody else? Okay, all right. You can sit down for the moment. Anybody here to speak in support of the applicant? Anybody here? Yes. You have a question about this one? Yes. Okay, sure. Just need your name and address.
My name is Ashina Jackson, and I just brought my property at 3517 47th Street. And
Okay.
the way that I'm seeing this plan,
Yep,
in the back, they just built the fence.
right.
And I'm just trying to make sure that it's not, that whatever they trying to add on, is it not pushing into my property? Because as that little space right there by that back gate, they really don't have,
Just set it right there. Yep.
Yeah.
in this back gate right there, they don't have no space like in between like that. So like, what is they basically trying to, like, what is they trying to put in that little tight space? Is it gonna?
Well, that, Okay, so to help you out here, so that fence, which looks pretty new, that's on their property,
Yes,
right?
they just, right, they just built, they
Yeah.
just put that up there.
Okay.
Just, they
So
took
they're-
the old fence down and just rebuilt that one right there.
What they're proposing to do then is they want to build onto that west side of their house. They'd cover up that window you see there, and it looks like they'd
Top one,
tear out
right
that porch probably,
Okay.
and then build a one and then a second story to tie into that roof line. But it will be 3.5 foot on their side of the fence.
Okay.
So there'll still be 3.5 feet between the new addition and their existing fence.
Okay.
So then they could still mow between that, maintain the fence, keep the storm water off of your property.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
how it's just.
yeah,
wondering,
yeah,
'cause
but
I got
they'd have
2
no
letters to build
right,
it.
they'd have no right to
We
intrude
just
on your
moved
property.
here and,
Yeah,
you know, we also was told that there wasn't a flooding area. And
Right.
We got
Yeah.
hit really hard in June.
right,
We
yes,
lost some of
yes.
everything over there. So just trying to make sure that whatever they building doesn't affect, because they steady moving poles and it's not
Yeah.
replacing what they, you know, where they put the pole posts. You know, it's like I got a hose in my backyard.
Okay.
basically, you know, and I'm still trying to fix on the inside of my house. Not alone, I have to worry about
Right.
what they tearing up that I maybe have to fix out on the outside part of my
Okay.
house.
Now, and did you say that you just moved into the house?
Yes, I just purchased my home.
Well, I think
March
the
of
two of
this
you should
year.
get together and exchange like Christmas cookies or something and have a little neighborhood get together because, yeah, what he's proposing to do would stay on his property. That's all he can
Yeah,
do by
that's
law
fine. I
and
just
still be
seen
3.5 foot
this
away.
and didn't know what it mean, and
Yes.
I was just trying to make sure
Okay.
it doesn't affect my property.
Right.
Buy
So is
me
that
a house of
helpful?
cookies.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
You bet. You're welcome, Ms. Jackson. Okay, anybody else here to speak in support or opposition? Okay, happy to answer questions. All right, seeing none, any further questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion, then go to board deliberation.
I'd like to move staff recommendation for the exception,
Okay?
second.
I think is what their recommendation is.
Yes, okay, so we've got a motion and a second to move staff recommendation, which would be denial of the requested variance, but approval of the amended appeal for the exception on the side yard, as listed. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 6-0. Okay, all right. You guys don't have much time to get started. You're gonna wait till the spring? Yeah. All right, have a good afternoon. Okay, item 15, a variance request at 4801 Fleur Drive.
I'm gonna try to make this as clear as possible. Because it's
yep.
an unusual situation. The property we're dealing with here is at the southeast corner of McKinley and Fleur Drive. This has been to the board previously, back in 2008, I believe. I think the chair is the only person that was on the decision. I'm sorry, it was 2009. They were granted a 10-year relief for the variance, which actually doesn't expire yet, so they have time. But one of the conditions of compliance was for it to be based on the plan that was shown. So this is the relief that they got, and this came about at that time because of an enforcement whereby the zoning officer did a citywide review of car lots, vehicle display lots in the city, and did a determination as to which point in time of the zoning ordinance was applicable and whether they still were in compliance with that. And then based on that, that drove the need for them to file a variance in 2009 of the 5-foot setback. What I should point out though then is that relief was granted subject to the landscaped areas within the public right-of-way and the planting plan prepared and approved by the city, which since that time, the owner of the property has allowed modification to areas that were in the landscaped areas. So when we look, and this is the sketch supplied by the applicant. So this is an area where they extended into area that was to be landscaped. And right now, this is the current conditions. There's gravel here and paving here. So what's in front of you is a request to amend the variance that was granted at that time to allow that display area to extend here. And right now, they're showing gravel. That would be an independent appeal that would actually have to come back if they want to leave that as gravel. You could grant this and they would have to pave it, potentially. The other thing is, because at the time of this enforcement review, it was based on an approved plan that went through administratively. So this area, if it were granted, I believe would drive an extension of the vehicle display, which would also drive a site plan that goes to P&Z. So there's another factor into that as well. I'm going to show you some photos of what's going on with the site. This is looking to the south from the north side of McKinley at the eastern edge of the property. So the area that's affected is back in this area where I'm pointing.
Right by the Motel 6, correct?
Yeah, this is the motel back here. Here's more of a straight on shot here. So you can see there's a fence that's right there. This is going a little bit further west, still looking south. And it's by the way, it's very challenging to get into a position to get any photos because of the traffic around this area. So,
Aren't there good
tried
public
my best.
sidewalks to be on?
There's no sidewalks on
Don't
that
need to
side
make
of
the
the street.
streets.
There's some sidewalk on the north side of McKinley.
Yeah.
So I actually was on a sidewalk. But this is looking south now. One of the things at the time was that they were able to get permission to put some plantings in the right-of-way as part of their planting plan that got approved. That doesn't really fall into the purview of the board directly, as those requirements, because they're in the right-of-way, it was just something that the city gave them permission to enhance the site as an alternative.
And the plantings did happen?
Yeah, so there's plantings there. They may need to refresh some of it. Like if you see this area right here.
Yep.
Where my finger is.
Gotcha.
They had a fairly extensive plan for that area, if you can see here. Because they got the variance to go 0, they decided to enhance it by getting permission to put plantings in the right-of-way to offset that. Even if they weren't wanting to amend today to remove that condition, they would be here in 2019 to be able to continue the variance of the 5-foot setback, or they'd have to comply with a 5-foot setback.
Or at that time when it expires, they comply
So-
with the current ordinance.
So you could, if you amend this, you could extend that period with basically a fresh amended variance. If you deny it, they still have a period of time where they would need to comply, and they would still have the variance. Now, the zoning officer might have another thought on that. If they haven't been in conformance, they may have surrendered their rights to that, but they're here with an appeal to meet that. From the staff perspective, we do not believe that they have demonstrated meeting the test for variance. So from our perspective, we are recommending denial. Again, it would be an enforcement matter as to whether they could finish out the term of what was granted by the board through the enforcement side of things. We believe that they could come at any time and alter this to meet the standards and still be able to operate on this site. I guess I'll let the appellant make their case on that, but we do not believe it meets the test for variance, and so we're recommending denial of that based on them not meeting the test for unnecessary hardship. Are there any questions at this time?
Eric, a brief one. This is a planting plan that they drew up. It's not an official site plan that was approved by the city as a site plan.
Well, I don't believe it was taken through the plan and zoning under
Right,
provisions
okay.
for vehicle display,
Got it.
because it was an existing use of vehicle display.
Yeah.
However, if they're going into area that was shown and approved for open space
Yeah.
to do display, that by its nature is expansion of a car lot, as it
Got
would
it.
be anywhere in the city that would drive a site
Site
plan to
plan,
go to the Plan
okay.
and Zoning Commission. So if
One-
if
yeah.
you grant the variance, they're still gonna have to do an amended site plan to go to the Plan and Zoning Commission.
And the main reason I ask that is because while I don't see where the vehicles are parked on the site on their planting plan, which is what they're trying to show,
Well,
it looks like in your aerial photo, if you could put that up, we've got vehicles displayed off of the property. We've got vehicles on display in the city right-of-way.
there might be one in this driveway.
So did the city give them some rental space to allow display of vehicles in the right-of-way?
No,
or-
that wouldn't
So-
be something, that wouldn't conform to this plan either. This
Right.
plan does show the areas to be kept open for maneuvering
Okay.
area and the areas to be displayed. So it does show these areas.
Okay.
Um,
But those
when-
off-site areas aren't allowed or shown as display
Yeah, so on
areas,
this aerial,
so they shouldn't be
the
used.
problem areas that, well, other than the fact that you pointed out the one in the driveway,
Yep,
the problem areas are right here and where this was extended south
right.
of this,
The new paving.
yep,
Okay.
this corner.
All right, I got you. Okay, any other questions for Eric? Okay. All right, applicant or representative of the applicant, come on down.
My name is Brady Moss, 274 South 62nd Street in West Des Moines. We have, when this variance was issued, we were able to use, if you don't mind, I'll probably put up my.
Sure, please do.
Okay, I think I got it, how we need it right there. Anyway, this concrete was added. I wasn't aware that that was gonna, needed to be, I needed to issue a new site plan to get that. Because sometimes, this was a grass and gravel area, mostly sand and gravel though. And so we decided to concrete that. I thought for the city requirements, we needed 5 feet of landscaping around the frontage areas. So we were using the city right away. Right here, we have 9 shrubs planted. And then right here, we have an extensive project, which is much more than needed by the city to be granted the use of the 5 feet setback. So anyway, there's approximately 25 feet on the Fleur Drive side. And what they're proposing is we add an additional 5 feet on our property line. I actually just redid all of this stuff on Fleur Drive and added more plantings. We also have 5 very mature trees, which I have photos of, and then also a small landscaped wall with a lot of fresh plantings, and all that's just been taken care of. And anyway, my thought was we did not need it when that was added in the back, and I apologize, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, the necessary steps to have that approved, because removing any of this concrete would be costly. And removal of anything in the front here, if we lose 5 feet, this right here is a row of cars. It handles about 13 to 14 cars. This area also handles about 13 or 14, and this will handle 6 or 7 cars. If we lose this area or this area, it will only allow for one row of vehicles, and would be just detrimental to my business. And then furthermore, we have cars parked along this and along this area. We are using that not necessarily for display, but for additional parking and to put vehicles that get traded in or vehicles that are not ready for resale yet. We have currently over 47 plantings there. 5 are very mature flowering pear trees that were part of the city requirement for the landscaping. So losing any of these spots would be very, very difficult to my business. And I have just a few photos of, this is a picture of the landscaping as a few, about a month ago. It was freshened up. As you can see, the trees are pretty big. And then we also have here another photo, and these trees stand probably close to 10 feet tall, if not higher than that. This is all on city right-of-way property, which I've, really appreciate using because without it, it'd be very hard for my business to exist. Right. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay. Questions for Brady? Brady, I just got a couple here. On your kind of planting plan, I'm going to call it your site plan for lack of a better term here.
Yeah.
There's the northern drive on Fleur Drive. My recollection is you don't really use that. You've got it blocked off at the Fleur curb, and then you have it blocked off where your cars are parked. Is that right?
Yeah. It's just an open concreted space.
Right. So you don't really use it or do anything with it. It's just
No,
there. Okay.
no.
Now the southern drive, that's an ingress egress. You can come in off Fleur there.
Yeah.
Right. But you've also been displaying vehicles in that.
I have displayed vehicles there. We do not currently have vehicles in that
Yeah, because you have
area.
no right to do that. I
Yeah,
think if
yeah.
a vehicle's out there, if it's in the city right away, the city could just tow it.
Yes, and
Want
we
that to
will
happen.
not have vehicles displayed in that area.
Okay. If we were inclined to grant you to retain the concrete, which, as a reminder, check with the city permit, which you should have known better since you've been
Okay.
in front of us before. If we allowed you to retain that, in exchange, would you take out that northern drive on Fleur and get that frontage cleaned up?
Yes, yeah, we could do that.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's the only questions I've got for now. Anybody else? Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
And
sir.
you're talking about this right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it looks like that's just kind of orphaned for both you and for the public and businesses.
Yeah.
It's just not used. This was an old Phillips 66, if I can remember
Yeah,
back far
yeah,
enough.
that's correct.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brady. Okay. Anybody to speak in support of the applicant? Going once, going twice. Anybody to speak in opposition to the applicant? You look apprehensive.
Well, I thought I was
Is
gonna
it
sit down the
information
whole-
or
the whole
opposition?
day. Chair, members of the board, Sue Ann Donovan. I'm the zoning enforcement officer for the city of Des Moines. This happens to bring flashbacks because it was one of the first meetings that I actually attended as the administrator of the zoning department.
It seems like yesterday.
Doesn't it? I recall this being a variance that was granted for a limited time of 10 years in order to allow them to figure out how they were going to do the 5-foot setbacks on the property themselves, number one. Number two, the board granted the variance with the understanding that he would use the city right-of-way to get some landscaping in. I am not sure he ever vacated or leased that property and is illegally using the city's right-of-way. Had I been more experienced at the time, I would have raised that issue with the board and made sure that the rights to the right-of-way would have been legally granted to the applicant.
Okay.
Number three, he has continuously used the city right-of-way for display of vehicles over the last, 4 or 5 years since I've moved into the vicinity down there. I've noticed it. Finally got a notice out to him to make him stop doing that. I think he may have outgrown the site. That's up to him to decide. I think the variance was for a limited time in order to grant him time to figure out how he's going to do his 5-foot setbacks himself. I don't believe he should be continued to be allowed to use city right-of-way for his landscaping and his buffers. That is not appropriate. I would suggest that what are we here for today?
And they want to amend it to remove the conformance with the plan so they can put the extended concrete.
Okay. If we're here only for the new concrete, I believe that needs to come in with a site plan and bring that into compliance. He has till 2019 for the variance, and that will be heard at the end at 2019, because I don't think that's what we're here for today.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like the appeal is just to amend the variance of 5 feet less than minimum required 5 feet of landscape setback. Is that right?
Is that what the application is for today?
Well, we'll have to have staff review what you wrote down.
Yeah, my understanding when I put on the agenda was to amend the variance that was granted to
variance.
also eliminate the expiration date of next year.
Okay.
And extend it? I would argue that, number one, he shouldn't be allowed to use the city right-of-way for his landscape and his buffer yards.
Right.
He needs to install his own 5-foot setback. If he is using the city right-of-way for his plantings, he needs to lease and vacate that and do it correctly. So I don't think any extensions of things that were granted 10 years ago to allow him time to bring the site into compliance would be in the best use of this property. And it has been a violation ongoing for years of parking illegally in the city's right-of-way. So I'm not in support of allowing this non-conforming to continue without bringing the property into compliance with what it's supposed to be in compliance with.
Okay. So we aren't really here today to approve any deals on the new concrete that went in.
I guess I'm trying to exactly figure out what the appeal is. If the appeal is to extend the original decision and order longer than you already gave him to bring the site into compliance, I would be against that.
Okay.
If he's going to maintain the city right-of-way plantings, he needs to vacate that and lease it correctly from the city. He can't be just using our city land to comply with his site plan requirements. That's inappropriate.
Right.
So I think he needs to bring the site into compliance with the 5-foot setbacks. If he's poured new concrete, he needs to bring that into compliance. He's probably going to have some green space issues because now he's put concrete into what we used to be his 20% open space or his open space requirements.
Right.
And I believe if the staff recommendation is accurate, it says in here that the request is to amend the variance to eliminate the expiration date and to eliminate the open space area. So in terms of the new concrete and gravel, which was to have been open space and green space, he would be able to retain it as it is, which doesn't comply with the current variance terms.
Correct.
That is today's request.
But even if he wants to do that by expanding the concrete, he would have triggered the site plan requirement anyway, which we can't overrule that, can we?
Right.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, if you grant that, he'll have to go to the plan.
It's a matter of, does he get to keep the concrete,
Right.
in which case he has to conform with the site plan requirements, or is he disallowed from continuing with
Okay.
that?
Since his relief from the first time hasn't truly expired yet, could he have the option to go, all right, I'm going to do a little time out, think through this, maybe bring it back to the board next month, and maybe during that time decide, am I going to go with a site plan, or have you heard enough, even what the city's saying, that, maybe I need to take a better look at this?
I'm happy to lease any of that city right-of-way property. I was actually I called the city of Des Moines to talk to the,
Do you want him to come to the podium?
Yeah, I'm
after
probably going to have to
done?
have you come back up here, but just hold those thoughts, Brady. When Sue's done, we'll give you a chance to have some comment regardless, but hold that comment, because I want to hear that.
I don't think we're not here on my determination that he's violated
Right.
the terms and
Right.
conditions
Okay.
of the
of the previously granted variance. That's something different.
Yeah.
We're here on his application to extend the variance in perpetuity and to not have to have the setbacks. The new concrete, he needs to amend a site plan and go through P&Z. That isn't, but those setbacks back there where he's put it too close to lot lines, that's something that could be considered here. It isn't before us right now.
Right.
I don't believe. I think the only thing that, and Glenna, correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that's here is an extension of or elimination of the timeline on the variance.
And the
Well, I think,
the landscape.
I think I would probably need to see the application, but I'm just reading right out of the recommendation, which says, upon inspection of the property on October 22, 2018 by zoning enforcement inspector, the site was found to not be in compliance with the approved planting plan since the open space area had been paved or gravelled.
Right.
So that's that area to the, I don't know what the directions are. here, but
Southeast.
Southeast. The appellant is requesting to amend the variance to eliminate the expiration date and to eliminate the open space area identified in the planning plan. So on that original decision and order that was put up, it would be taking out that condition as to the open space.
Okay.
I think to go along with your point, Sue, if as Mel suggested, more time was given, that's a determination that can be made, but that does not then allow him to, I mean, he can't use that indefinitely for the next year. He's still in violation of the existing variance.
So the appeal that's before us still makes sense, but there's some other unresolved issues that would be beyond us with today's discussion regardless.
So what we're here for today.
If we grant him a variance of the 5 feet less than the 5 feet required, he still wouldn't be allowed to, well, wouldn't be allowed to retain the new pavement anyway, because he doesn't meet your open space requirement.
I believe what he's here for today, if I can try and clarify.
Okay, and then we'll come back to
He was granted
him.
a variance for a period of 10 years to
Right.
expire in 2019.
Yep.
So he didn't have the 5-foot setback requirement. He was told he had to comply with a planting plan, and it would be reconsidered, and it would expire at 10 years. What he wants to do is take off the 10 years and take off the landscape plan.
Okay.
That's
I
what he
got you.
wants. He wants you to eliminate the 10 years and the landscape plan and not have the 5-foot setbacks. He wants nothing.
All the way around.
He wants to do nothing.
Okay, hold that thought. Okay,
So
all right,
I believe that's why we're here today.
okay,
Again,
We're saying the same thing.
yes, I think we are in different ways.
Okay.
Again, my recollection was that he was given 10 years to do this in order to give him time to put in the 5-foot setback on his own property. He hasn't made an attempt to do that, and now he wants to request that he doesn't have to do it. So that's, and I object to that, so.
okay, clear enough. All right, anybody else to speak in opposition? Seeing none. Before we go back to Brady,
Mr. Chair, I'm going to
Yes.
present this exhibit of his application, so you have the intent of what he
Sure.
was
Appreciate that.
applying for.
Okay,
And I'm going to show it here on the
yeah, help us,
overhead, but then I'm going to pass it around.
help us paraphrase that
So
to
it's going to be
you, so.
Exhibit A.
Okay. What does it generally say before you pass it around for the
There
record?
was a question about his request to extend the time frame.
Right,
and
okay,
That clearly indicates his intentions on
okay. Okay. All right. What we'll do here for a moment while this is coming back around, Brady, do you want to address us on any clarifications that you want to make? In essence, Sue-Ann spoke a little bit in opposition, so that gives you the right to have some rebuttal here for up to 3 minutes.
I also have talked to the city about leasing that property. I was told to come here and ask for the variance, and he said it would be timely. He'd have to meet with traffic and some different things if I was to lease that space.
Saying it would
He
take
said
time.
It would take
time to get all
Yeah,
that
it would
figured
take time for, not necessarily time for me, it would take time out of the city
Well,
to,
sure.
you guys would spend money on this, trying to lease me a small piece of property. I am very willing to do whatever it takes to, tear out that specific piece of concrete and add more landscaping and make that a nicer property.
But in essence, what you're saying is, yeah, I want to get rid of the requirement to even have the 5-foot green space setback.
Well, no, I want to keep all the landscaping that's in place currently, that's on the city proper, or the city right away.
Yeah.
We want to keep that,
But
and we want to improve that.
We don't
actually.
have the ability as a board to indefinitely grant you the ability to do that. What
Okay.
we were doing the first time, because I'm the only one who was here, and I see how we voted.
Okay.
We were doing this as a stopgap measure.
Okay.
That we didn't have the authority to say, well, you can use the right-of-way to meet the alternative for the setback and the landscaping. But if you do so, and the city doesn't care for the moment, that'll get you down the line far enough, then you can come up with a better site plan later, and eventually this runs out.
Yeah, well,
I think our intent of the board, because that's why it was 5-1. We wanted you to somehow be able to use the site, have some landscaping for a temporary period, but eventually then, yeah, your business model is going to show, I need a bigger property. It's time for this to be a coffee shop or do something else, or you'd eventually put in the landscaping. But now we've come back around, we're back where we started, plus you've expanded your site and been using the city right-of-way to display vehicles for sale, both of which were other violations. So we're kind of back where we started from, but we can't grant you the right to use the city right-of-way to have the landscaping.
Okay.
We just can't. We could say if the city doesn't care, without a formal agreement.
So I need to go before the city and try to lease the property?
Well, you could, or you could cut back your pavement 5 foot, meet the landscape requirement on your own property, and then ditch all that stuff in the city right of way.
Just that would really
I'm
be
not saying that's our
detrimental to
board
my-
deal, I'm saying that's what you could legally do.
Yeah, yeah.
But then your own expansion on the southeast corner presents a different issue.
And there is, to my knowledge, there is no needed green space for a car lot other than the frontage areas.
Well, I'm not gonna debate that with you.
I think it's a
That'd be up to staff.
5 feet landscaped area that's needed.
Right. So in general, this is your appeal. So do you think that generally fits what's on the record here for what we're here to vote on today?
Well, yeah, I came here to use that, to continue to use that property and also retain the concrete in the back of the property.
Okay. All right, I got it. Okay.
So, I don't know what your recommendation is.
Well, we'll discuss it and see.
Okay.
That's what that part of board deliberation is all about. Okay. All right. Speaking of that, then we'll go ahead and close the public portion and go to board deliberation. Yeah, this is one to wrap our arms or heads around on this too. So there'd normally be a 5 foot landscape setback requirement as is. He was granted a temporary variance to that with the understanding he was going to make improvements in the right of way that he couldn't necessarily have indefinitely. He made somewhat of a good faith effort to do that. But now that's expired. And as a board, if we would want to grant a variance, you could just say outright, I don't care about landscaping, and vote to grant him a variance. You could do that. Or you could say the time has come to get the thing dressed up on your own property and meet the requirements. John?
I kind of like where you were going earlier in the meeting about getting rid of that north entryway and the south entryway along Fleur Drive, and then him having to lease green space, the way it sits now. But quite honestly, the concrete between the Motel 6 and there actually looks better. Whether it's right or wrong, but what it was before.
And if that is wrong, he would have to deal with that separately, or sounds like have a separate appeal to keep it, or it would trigger his site plan on his own. Is that correct?
I mean, so I made definite points. You just can't have landscaping and.
Okay.
It sounded like to me that maybe he's a little confused on where he goes to get permission from the city to use the right-of-way, because he said, called somebody and somebody said, well, the city isn't here, just use it, is what it sounded like to me.
Well, I think what the city
I think it's
said.
some bad information.
It will be a process that takes time to see if the city would want to consider that.
Okay.
But if the city wants to look at, and obviously they're gonna repave Fleur Drive. Some people want it narrower, some people want it wider. They might make a more expansive turn lane to the right there to help traffic, start to get off of Fleur. I have no idea. But even if they would grant that, who knows, it could be a temporary lease arrangement. Unless they want to truly vacate right-of-way, which means give the ownership to somebody. And I don't think they'll do that.
Okay.
But that's neither here nor there.
Good points
but-
brought up
yeah.
with the changing.
Other thoughts? It's a heavy one. Obviously, there's a staff recommendation out there for denial. We can discuss it further, or we could see if somebody wants to look at granting variances or moving staff or somewhere in between.
I have to commend for the planting that he's done. The car lights are a specific thing with me, especially on corners, because they do impair sight, and I think that's why they have you back 5 feet. And things you mentioned, he was given a specific timeline to bring this up, and I think I'm inclined to go with what the staff recommendation is.
Okay? All right?
Is that a motion?
Yep. Right?
I'll move- I'll move staff
I
then.
guess I was reading that in that, but yeah, she didn't actually say that. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to deny the requested variance. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1, and John, is that you there too? That's 2. Okay. All right, so motion carries. The amendment is not granted. So Brady, I think what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to come back to the city and rework this as a new site plan and get it squared around under the current ordinance.
And go before the city and try to lease that property.
Well,
That's another matter.
Yeah, that's another matter entirely, which is beyond us, because we just basically said you have to have the 5-foot setback on your own property. That's basically the takeaway from this. Correct, Glenna?
Yes, and that the open space in the back needs to be open space.
Right, for the remaining year,
And that
yes.
the variance
comply,
terminates
yeah.
in 2019.
If there's any consolation here, it's a temporary one. I think Eric just said the current variance still retains preeminence until it expires. Is that correct?
Sure, so it will last until what, November of 2019, I believe that date was.
Okay.
However, it's still not in compliance with that open space, so there's still that issue. But I guess I would recommend that you contact whoever either Eric or Bert, whoever you've been working with, and discuss it with them.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that concludes that item. That'll move us on then to item 16, a conditional use permit variance and exception request at 1525 High.
That's our revised staff report.
Switch. So this is my.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 16 is a series of appeals that would allow for reuse of an existing structure for a tavern-type use that would have a brewery component within it. And then they're also wanting a variance and an exception to allow a freestanding sign at the front of the property line that doesn't meet the freestanding overlay district requirements. The subject property is located on the north side of High Street, in between 15th and 16th Street. It's next to the Adong Restaurant and the Murillo Flats. I believe it used to be used for auto repair use. That's now vacant and being converted to this use. Here's the site sketch that they provided. You can see the existing building would be used for the tavern and brewery use. And then they would be adding a patio and as well as an outdoor seating area around a fire grill here, and then a retention of the off-street parking on the eastern portion of the property. Here's the design that they've proposed. Again, you can see the building is built right up to the front property line as well. They're proposing a sign on this trellis feature right here. The next photo should show it a little bit better. They've also provided me with an alternative design for that sign, so if the board goes with the staff recommendation today, they do have a alternative sign that they could do, but I believe their intent is to keep to get the approval of the signage as proposed here today. Here's a better view of that sign that's on that trellis. You know, the freestanding overlay district requires any freestanding sign to have a base that's equal to either 2 feet or 25% of the total height. In this instance, the sign is 12 feet tall, which means they would need to have a 3-foot tall base. And also, since it's less than 25 feet from the front property line, the sign is supposed to only be 8 feet tall, so they have also asked for that exception. And then here's the alternative design for that sign that they provided this morning. So if the board goes with staff recommendation, this is what they would have to do. But I believe they would prefer that sign. But this sign does have the 3-foot tall concrete base. But it still needs the exception of 4 feet over the maximum allowed 8 feet of height. But it doesn't need that variance to the definition of freestanding sign. And here's the floor plan again. So I have it. Generally, the east half of the building would be used for the tavern type uses, and then the west 40% would be used for the brewery component. I believe they would be bottling the drinks or the beverages brewed here. They would be selling on site and then also distributing off site. Now, to show you a few pictures, here's the building as it is today. I believe this would be reopened as a overhead door, according to their sketch. Here's another view of the east side of the building. And then this is looking at the parking lot. And then here's the consent map. We had 2 cards come in support. This comment card was from the Ryan Galloway with Amarillo Flats. He also submitted a letter just today that went around, which is in support of the project. And then I also passed around a letter from the Sherman Hill Neighborhood Association, who is also in support of the project. Staff does believe that they've satisfied the criteria necessary for granting the conditional use permit for a tavern. We have recommended several conditions of approval, and you should all find in front of you a revised staff recommendation. Condition number 3, revised at the applicant's request. They just wanted a little bit of clarification on what our recommendation originally was, that any brewery use must be accessory to a tavern use. So as you can see, we did define that better. Then our recommendation was also for denial of that freestanding sign. If they went with this design, they would still need the exception to the height, but they wouldn't need the variance to the definition of freestanding sign. And then I won't go through the rest of the conditions, but they're just the standard ones for taverns. And since there is an outdoor patio, we have a couple conditions regarding sound on the patio. So,
Questions for Bert? Bert, we do have Jack Hatch's Woodland, whatever they are, the brownstones,
yeah.
or brick stones there to the north. I'm assuming staff's determined there's enough separation of any sound issues
yeah, and really,
from that residential.
given the proximity of the Woodland Avenue brick stones and the Murillo, that was really the reason for condition number 5, where we've recommended that any outdoor sound that's not in accordance with the type E permit be limited to 2 events per month. So.
Okay, I got it. Okay. Anything else for Bert? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant? Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for your patience and waiting.
Hi. Yeah. My name's Whitney Seelix, 3257 Rare Road in Iowa City. So not yet a Des Moines resident, but hopefully soon.
Cool.
My husband, Scott, and I are looking to open this brew pub in the Sherman Hill neighborhood. He is currently lead brewer at Big Grove Brewery in Iowa City, former attorney, so following his passion. And
the city requirements, apparently.
yeah, yes. I am a former restaurant manager, and then have been staying at home the last year with our son, since we knew we were kind of trying to open our own space. So the plan is for us to run this jointly, and yeah, I have our architects here to kind of go through specifics, but the plan is for it to be a 7-barrel brew house, 7-barrel system, which is roughly 900 barrels a year, which 1,800 kegs. It's really fairly small operation, and we plan to keep distribution as low as possible, as it's more lucrative for us to have everything consumed on site. So, but we have friends in Iowa City that will probably be like, hey, can we have some of your beer? So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Should be willing to answer a few questions? Okay. I might just lead off with just one or two here. So with what you've got proposed here, and I know you had some recent discussion with the staff, and that's why we had kind of this amended conditional use request. Would you be okay with the staff recommendations like Bert presented then?
Could you clarify on the music part again that you just
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, the way it was worded was number 5, that we said any outdoor speakers need to be in accordance with the appropriate sound permit, and then while it's allowed to obtain a Class E, which is like background auditory in nature, we said that any event requiring a less restrictive sound permit be limited to 2 calendar days within any given month, where any event, that's if you're having like live bands that have amplified sound.
Yeah.
So if you had a little background music on the patio,
Right.
where I could just kind of hear it there like I would in an elevator, but outside,
Yeah.
you'd be allowed to do that. But if you want to have live bands going and amplified audio and jamming away, where people are hearing that, usually off premise, then that's where the neighborhood issues start popping up. So do you envision having like live mic night out there, or this would be more, I gather around the fire, Bob Seger might quietly play in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah, definitely more low key. But obviously there are always exceptions, so I think that sums it up very well, like 2 calendar days a month.
And you'd be able to work within that.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay.
And yeah, I think our hours, we plan to be closing like 11 on Fridays and Saturdays is kind of what we're thinking, right? So
Very
not like
nice.
a late night,
Okay.
So yeah, family friendly establishment.
And I know staff is recommending to have the 3-foot concrete base for what I'm calling your trellis sign. Is that okay with you guys?
You're the architect. You just had to get to that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Hello, Andrew Stith with Slingshot Architecture and architect team.
You have a beer named after you too?
What's that?
Isn't there a beer over in Iowa City named Slingshot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Back pocket.
That's your competitor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back pocket. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, we're first. We're part of that now. We feel like the sign recommendation is maybe a bit high for the proportion. Ideally, we see the benefits of having a sign that's durable at the base. However, about a foot or 18 inches would probably look aesthetically a little better. But we can definitely work within the 3 feet if we have to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. You can't also just put the sign on the building and then we don't have to deal with any of this.
We have those as well.
That's
No, it's-
what
you-
they're
yep,
proposing.
right,
That's
right.
the alternative of 3 feet. And I think he's saying the 3 feet might be taller than they would like.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
So about half that we would see
I
as
gotcha.
more accepting.
Okay. Okay. All right, that's helpful to understand.
I can walk you through the design just a bit more.
I don't know if the board wants that, yeah.
I would just like to point out one thing.
Sure.
The property line is actually not along the building, as you can see here.
Okay.
It's about 5 feet from that building. Just wanted to clarify
Okay,
that.
so your awning and where the trellis would mount, that's all still on your property?
On the
then?
property, yes.
Okay, all right, yeah. Okay,
Any questions?
I don't think I have any others. Anybody? Okay. All right, there's a huge audience here, so we'll see what everybody thinks. Anybody here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Any further questions for staff? Okay, if none, we'll just go ahead and close public portion, go to board deliberation.
It sounds like they've done everything they need to do. They've talked to the Sherman Hill neighborhood, they've talked to other people. They're willing to go with the conditions here, and so I think it'd be a great addition to the neighborhood, so I'll move staff.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Hang on,
Yeah,
Cindy.
feel free to jump in.
We're not in the sign business, and I understand what we're trying to do here. That sign is ugly that we've asked them to put up, period.
I agree.
Greg and those guys know how to design signs.
I agree too, and that's not a pole sign, what they're
Yeah,
trying to do for
and
the record.
So I would say, let's let them put the sign up they want. It's a great project.
So we change
And-
2 to sign?
So if I can make a friendly amendment to
You
your
can
motion.
certainly do that.
And let's let them put the sign up that they want to put up. We talk too much about signs. And I know
Come
I
on,
say
Dave,
that-
tell us how you really feel.
I know I say that at every meeting.
That's okay.
But in this case, I think it looks great the way they've got it designed. So I just say what do we can take off?
Take off 2 instead of
Take off number 2?
place the sign that they presented at
Yep.
the meeting.
And have were you guys talking about a 1-foot base or something?
1.5 foot. 1 foot.
That's still at variance level,
So
1.5?
we'd be approving the variance for the sign.
Okay,
I'm fine with that.
okay,
Okay,
all right.
that's fine.
Do you want any kind of base? I mean, if you're gonna give a variance, I'm not sure what their original design showed.
Can we just put it as presented? On the picture?
Yeah, let's see which one, because I think they're there.
This is what was presented with, I believe that without any base at all.
That's just a void. It's like it's mounted between 2 poles, it looks like, and is that hanging off the building?
But is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
Okay. If that's what you want to propose, you
Yep.
can. Okay,
I'll propose that.
okay. All right, so you want to grant the conditional use permit, subject to all conditions, but give a variance
I'm
for
making
the...
a friendly amendment to
Yeah.
Lynn's motion,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, is that
He
clear
had
enough?
something to say.
Okay.
No, that was gonna, I had the same thoughts as.
Okay, I just want to make sure you get your point.
So Mel, I'm not the only one.
That's, that's okay.
We'll make a note.
That's okay. We all work together very well,
Yeah.
regardless. Okay. All right, so we've got a motion and a second to grant the conditional use permit subject to the conditions presented, however, with the variance to not require the sign base.
Second.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand, say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just gonna, all those not in favor, no, I love what you're doing, but just in principle, I like to have sign bases and design with or around that. But motion carries 5-1. You're gonna be a great asset to Sherman Hill. You bet. Keep up the good work. And when this is built, then you're moving to Des Moines. And you're gonna live in the city of Des Moines. Yeah, say yes. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. Okay. You guys need a 5-minute break? Trucking on?
Couple more.
Let's roll.
Yeah, we only have 2 more. Okay. All right. Item 17, special permit request at 3700 and 3722 Grand Avenue for the Supreme Chapter of the PEO Sisterhood.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this item is also about signage. However, since it's a nonprofit, they were able to come in as a special permit rather than the variance. So we're looking at special permit criteria on this item rather than variance. The subject property is the PEO at the corner of at the southwest corner of Grand Avenue and 37th Street. It's actually two parcels. They recently improved the front yard area to have a drive-through driveway in the front yard, and then they also added a decorative fence around the perimeter and significant landscaping. Here's the plan that this is how the front yard area has been developed. I believe, yeah, north is up. So they've put this fence here along Grand Avenue, and then they've attached 3 signs to that fence. So one of the signs is here in the middle, and then the other 2 are on the ends along 37th Street and along the driveway over here. None of the signs meet the freestanding overlay district requirements, which require any sign to have at least a 2-foot solid base below the entire width of the sign, which is what drives the need for the special permit. This is the sign that's at the center of the property along Grand Avenue. You can see it's a very attractive sign. It just doesn't meet the definition. I know what Dave's thinking, because it's a very nice sign, but it doesn't have the 2 feet of clearance beneath the entire width of the sign. And then the other 2 signs on the sides, they originally attached them to the wrought iron fence, and they've since taken them down once they learned that they were in violation of the zoning ordinance. But the special permit would allow them to put these 2 signs back up on the ends of the sign. So here are some photos. This shows the existing sign that's out front. Again, it's a very attractive sign. It just doesn't have the 2 feet of clearance below the entire width of the sign face. Then this is on the east side along 37th Street. They had stuck the sign on the fence here. They've since taken it down. And then just a few more photos. This is moving from east to west. And then this is at the west side. Similar situation here. They put the directional signs on this fence here. They've since taken it down pending the outcome of this hearing today. And here is the consent map. As you can see, there's a huge stack of cards going around, half in support, half in opposition. Most of them are condo owners that live in the notification area. Staff looked at this, and we felt, as you know, we try to toe the company line and require any sign to have the required base. So we have recommended, it reads as approval, but really when it gets down to it, it's more or less denial, because we've said that we recommend approval subject to, 1, any sign comply with the definition of sign monument, which means it has the durable opaque base equal to at least 2 feet of height or 25% of the overall sign. And then condition number 2, any sign shall be installed with a licensed sign contractor. And one thing I would point out is those 2 directional signs that they had put on the fence. If they would reconfigure those and put them on these posts here with at least 2 feet of clearance above, that would probably meet the intent of the overlay district. But again, their preference is to put the signs on the wrought iron fence rather than on the brick pillar. So. Any questions for me?
So they built their main sign without a permit?
Right, they didn't need a, I don't believe they needed a permit for the fence because it's 4 feet in height or less. But then they went ahead and put the signage on it without the permits.
Okay, all right.
So I don't know where the miscommunication happened, but.
Okay. Well, we'll see what the applicant has.
So they had a contractor that built a sign for them that didn't want to follow the sign ordinance?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, any questions for Bert? Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Okay. Applicant or representative of the applicant, come on down.
Dennis Reynolds, 112 10th Des Moines, with Reynolds Urban Design. I thought you might like some background information, and it might be helpful.
You must do some work in eastern Iowa, too.
Around the Midwest.
Couldn't help but notice.
Yep. Agri-community and
Very
Cedar
cool.
Rapids.
Okay.
I've been working with PEO for over 2 years now, and it's been an exciting project. Let's see, this probably gives me, whoop. You're
One
gonna have to
more.
help me with your format. There we go. So surprisingly, a lot of people in Des Moines don't know about PEO, but it's a very large philanthropic education organization, has almost 250,000 members, has 6,000 chapters around the world, and this is their international headquarters right here on Grand Avenue, so it's one of those well-kept secrets in our community. They support educational opportunities for women, and they've been doing this for 149 years. So next year is their 150th anniversary. They're anticipating something like 500 people coming to town to be on site to celebrate that. So a part of what we've been working on in the past few years is to upgrade the quality of the building inside, outside, and the landscape around it as well, to be sure that we're a welcoming facility for these events as well as ongoing events. They have people coming here all the time. It's interesting, every time I have a meeting with Jackie, the CEO is here as well today. I see people from out of state coming onto campus. They have a small museum type exhibits in their building, which people come to see, and they come to see their chapter in California maybe donated an object, and they come to see that object. So they also have tour buses that come here and bring people to literally spend the day visiting on campus. So these improvements were overdue and really appreciated by the chapter as a significant improvement as they move forward. And so it's been a significant investment in the Founders Walk, is what we call the garden in the north side between Grand Avenue and the building. There was actually an old driveway in the front that really didn't function right. It was very not safe. It was close to the intersection. We took that driveway out and modified it so that we could have a much more gracious entry drive, as well as a more gracious landscape. And then all the area in the green, virtually all those plantings are new except for the mature trees that were there. So it's a series of walkways that have plantings, they have teak benches, and a large piece of public art that people can enjoy. And we see not only the PEO members, but people in the neighborhood go out of their way to take a walk and enjoy the garden as well. So these are some pictures of Founders Walk. Thought you might enjoy these. They look a lot warmer than it is today. But you can see there's a series of benches that honor their 7 founders, and then the large sculpture piece by a artist out of Northeast Iowa. And you just saw these pictures of the early design pieces. Okay. So the central campus identification was important to us. We had the brick wall and then 2 flanking piers, and it creates a gateway into the campus. The brick matches the building, has a stone cap as well. That's a custom cap, a metal sign, and the signage matches their fonts and colors of the organization. We think it's an appropriate scale and use of material. We purposely centered the sign in the middle of the brick panel, so it doesn't technically have 2 feet underneath. It has about 12 inches to 15 inches between the brick and the bottom of the sign. The text actually starts about 2 feet from the ground. So we think it's very attractive. We think it's very safe and durable and appropriate for the organization and for the community and neighborhood. The directional signs on the corners were important to us. They have so many visitors coming from out of town, coming from the airport or the interstate system, and it's not obvious as you drive down Grand where to enter the driveway to take you to the front door. So that's what these signs were doing. You can see in the left-hand photo, it's very, I think, very discreet and appropriate to scale is the sign that says building entry, that one on the left. And we wanted to mount it on the ornamental metal sign. If we put it on the brick pier, it becomes so much smaller, half that size. We're concerned that motorists won't be able to see it in time to really act upon it. On the other photo to the right, that's after we took the signs down. We wanted to be sure that once we learned we were not in compliance, that we didn't allow that to continue. But likewise, on the right, we think it's important that it's that 2-foot by 4-foot sign that allows visibility from a sufficient distance that motorists can see it and go to the appropriate driveway. So we'd like to put those metal signs back up. We'd like to leave the metal sign on the brick wall as it currently is. And that's what we're seeking from you today.
So Dennis, let's back up a little bit. I want to pick on you for
Yeah,
30 seconds.
yeah.
So since you're the grand architect of this and it looks beautiful and awesome, you didn't pause along the way and go, maybe we need some permits before we start building signs.
How did that happen? Right. Yeah. You know, it wasn't one big, oh my gosh, it was a series of little ones.
Sure.
We had a pre-app meeting with the city to identify, you know, what do we need.
So you did sit down with the city?
We did the pre-app, and so we could identify, you know, what we needed to be sure and do. You know, at that time, I don't think our signage was necessarily, you know, in fruition. You know, we just had this idea of these gardens and these driveways, and maybe we had some ideas of signs, maybe we didn't. I quite frankly can't remember.
Like I said, just want to tease you a little bit.
And then over the course of the 2 years, you know, there was lots of design phases and entities other than myself involved. So staff got involved in doing some design work. They have a very talented graphic artist, but she hadn't done signs before. PEO hired a signage contractor who was not a signage contractor. It was Beeline and Blue, who do very quality work, but they're not used to doing signs, so they didn't realize to pull a permit. And so all of us, you know, sort of just went our merry way and suddenly realized, oops, we really should have pulled a permit. So there's blame. I'll take blame as the overall architect, designer, but it was a series of oh my goshes, you know, someone didn't catch it along the way.
Well, you'll help educate other people today who might be watching.
There you go.
But in practicality now, with what we do have in front of us, so you had mentioned the driveway that didn't work, and you were trying to figure that out. So if I would come to visit PEO today at basically the 3700 block of Grand, can I turn on 37th and get in?
This shows here the main entrance drive is off of Grand on the northwest corner. And that's why we feel those corner signs are important for that. That's just the question you're asking.
Yeah.
There's a tendency to turn on the 37th.
Yep.
Because that would take you to a parking lot that's in the back of the facility, which is for staff.
Right.
But if I'm a visiting group or if I'm a tour bus, we want them to turn off of Grand and go down that driveway that goes across the front of the building into the main front building.
And only one way.
And it's a one-way driveway. We did that very purposefully. And again, we had discussions with staff to be sure that that was a safe operation.
So coming from the west, you're like, turn here now and get in.
Yeah, don't
If
get
they were
too
coming
far.
from the east, go past 37th to the next turn in.
Right, so there needs to be some sort of legibility time to see it and act on it and not sort of have a sudden traffic movement that you don't want.
All right. Well, we'd have to see how the board generally feels, but we've had some cases where people want to hang a sign on a fence, and we've pretty much said no in a number of cases. You heard the word precedent today.
Right.
Each case sometimes has its own merits, but by and large, we haven't been approving signs hanging on fences. If you wanted to have your, quote, directional sign, I know what you're saying about having it on the brick bollard. It might be too small, but you might be able to talk with staff about other freestanding signs that might be allowed if they were positioned properly and constructed properly. I don't know.
But I'm not aware of those options. I guess, you know, the most technical option would be to build a much larger brick monument sign,
which you probably don't want to do.
We don't want to spend the money, and I don't think it blocks the view of the garden. It's counter to kind of what we're trying to achieve.
Right. Or you could take a step back and just go, you know what? Let's just have a two-way drive and toss up, and they're going to make the turn one way or the other then.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help with your grand plan.
No, and the design's really designed for one-way traffic
I
movement.
get
It
you.
has one lane of moving
Yep.
and one lane of pull-off on the right-hand side, just like an airport concourse.
No, charter buses appreciate that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Are most of your buses though, Dennis?
I'm sorry?
These are announced visitors, correct? These people just don't-
Sometimes not. You know, sometimes
Surprise
a group of women, say from Marshalltown, will just get in a couple of cars, and they'll come and they'll show up, and they'll, say, hey, we want to just kind of tour the building,
Okay.
or they'll tour the gardens. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Dennis? Okay. Anything else you want to add? You good for
No,
now?
thank you for
Okay.
consideration.
All right. Anybody here to speak in support of the applicant? You can have 5 minutes, Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Mott, and 3,700 grand. And I wasn't going to speak, but one of the things that I was going to clarify from what Dennis talked about, we are the international headquarters. When people show up, they cry there. It's a 47,000 square foot building, and it hadn't really been worked on for quite some time. We've been working with Greg Edwards. The CVB's doing all of our hotel we're gonna take over Des Moines next September for an entire week. And people could not find our property. People thought we were a nursing home, or nobody knew what we were. So there's a long story behind, we're sometimes bigger other places than we are here. But one of the things that, even when we designed this, is I came to a meeting this summer, and one of these meetings, and it was for the 37th Street Circle Drive at Greenwood School. That was approved. So I'd actually been to one of these meetings before, so I knew what today was going to be like. But we now, more than ever, want to keep people off of 37th because of the school. 37th traffic, because of the Circle Drive, has changed drastically. So if we can get people to come in and use our other drive, and even if they can, the first part of that, if they can even go back out, it's just, I've been working with the school because we had a lot of problems with them blocking both drives. So the parents line up and block both of our entrances. And so the school principal and I have been working together. They had a special event last week. We let them use our lot. And so we're trying to work together with them. But it's even more of a reason because that whole 37th Street, as much as we can, when the school's going in and out, those kids move fast. I don't know, but they can move really quick. And we want to make sure that if we can get people to use our other drive, it's extremely helpful. So just one other thing I wanted to say, so thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, anybody else speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we'll close public portion and go to board deliberation.
Well, I'm reading the comment cards with them, it's kind of split down the middle. It's really, I don't know. Personally, I'd never heard of PEO before. And with you having an anniversary coming up and Grand can be kind of a busy area, I think we do need to allow for some type of directional sign. You can get quite flustered when you're trying to find a new place. I don't know how to achieve it. But I think we do need to do it, and I think there needs to be maybe some communication with people in the neighborhood on why we're allowing this. One card says everybody knows what PO is, and it's there, and I go, no, not everybody does. But those are my thoughts.
Well, half the population can't be a member of PEO because we're guys. I've got two.
But a lot of you have women in your lives, like a mom.
I have two close female friends who are very proud PEO members in your Des Moines chapter. PEO is great. I think in this case, there's some merit to it. You certainly need to have a sign that's visible to let people know where you're at. By default, not by design, I think they have a good faith effort on meeting the monument sign criteria. If the PEO sign's a little close to the pavement or the ground level, in this case, I'd be inclined to grant a variance on that one because we have a brick monument base. I think we had a Christ the King sign on Porter and Southwest 9th they'd constructed. It was a brick sign. It didn't have a separate base below it. Remember that one, Dave? We granted a variance there. I would kind of get that.
Nonprofit.
We don't have to solve everybody's site management issues here as a board as much as people can propose what their concerns are. Directional parking might be a concern, but I'm real leery of having signs hanging on fences. I just don't like that.
Well, and one of the comment cards said it looks like an afterthought.
Yes, well, that's a big part of
for
it.
all the planning that went into this, there's got to be a better solution than that.
And then you can see the back side of the sign usually, which is then usually going to be blank, or you see how it's affixed.
Right.
you know, they might have to do some more homework on their own and frankly spend some more dollars, but I'd be inclined to grant the variance for the main sign, but not a variance to allow the retention or reinstallation of those signs on the gates or on the fence.
Is that a motion? Because I second it if it is.
Okay. And that's with all due respect and trying to help you as much as I can. Okay, if that's clear enough for the record?
It is.
Okay, so I got a motion. Thank you, Mr. Chido, for a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-0. Okay. Dennis has a great plan there, so I'm competent in your design abilities, but you might have to go back to the drawing board on those directional signs. Ask staff what's allowed and how you can do it, and they'll work with you. Okay? All right, thank you for coming in today. Okay, that brings us to, I think, our last item, item 18, which is a variance request at 2211 59th Street.
Mr. Chair, the other thing I was going to point out, and Dennis has got his little. You won't go anywhere anyway because it looks like it has your car keys.
Just in case.
Just to
There's a
keep you
last-minute
entertained.
thought.
It was a special permit, so they didn't have to demonstrate variance criteria.
Oh, okay. All right, which is fine.
I'm not sure
So
that was
our order can reflect that.
Yes, we've got it. Yep.
Yeah,
Brittany
okay.
will.
Item 18 is a variance condition. It's for a sign that the applicant is proposing on the non-occupant wall. This is for a car wash. I should probably pass you the cards here first. And we did have a communication from
Car
Moines
wash.
Association. So the request is for a 4.92 foot sign by 9.92 foot sign, wall mounted, but it's on a non-occupant wall of the building because the signs are earned on the street frontage occupant side.
Okay.
So in this case.
So it's like a sidewall sign?
Yeah, so in this case, their occupant frontage is here, which gives them their earnings of 60 square feet.
Right.
They are allowed to put half of that on a non-occupant wall.
Yep.
So they could go 30 square feet.
Okay.
But they are wanting to go 48.79 square feet. So
Okay.
that's where they're running into problem. And just to give you what they submitted, submitted the, this is with east to the top. I'm going to turn it so you can see that. So you have the little drive-through here. It used to be Dairy Queen and then it changed to a independent area. So this is off of Hickman on 59th, I'm sorry. So the circulation is to come in here and go out, but they wanted exposure on their non-occupant wall to Hickman Road, which is where most of the motoring public would be coming to this site in all likelihood. This is a schematic of what it would look like on that north wall facing Hickman on the building. This is actually the proposed copy of the sign, just to get a feel for that. The site shots, this is from that intersection at Hickman and 59th Street looking southeast. So you can see right now this white wall on the north side of the car wash. More of a view from 59th and more of a view from the southwest on 59th looking to the northeast. Staff's looking at this in terms of the variance criteria. We did not believe that it met the test for variance. We understand it's reasonable to have signage, it's reasonable to for that business to have some signage, and they do get some allowance on that north wall. We do believe they've got some practical challenge due to their proximity from the main corridor in the placement of their existing building. So we do think that they do meet the exception level criteria, and we would allow them then to go over up to a 45 square foot sign, which is not really that much different from the variance level that they ended up with at 48.79. So we would support a exception of 15 square feet over the maximum 30, subject to the sign being in accordance with a permit and in substantial compliance with the design. We're not regulating content, we just want to make sure we're talking about a rectangular panel on the side of the building, so. Are there any questions? Yeah, the Merle Hay neighborhood is looking to leverage, I think, quite a few site elements. I'm not sure what the board can really look at in terms of, you know, granting the appeal subject to them doing a number of other things on the site. Yeah. They've been in continuous use with this use. So I think it's a little bit of a challenge for the amount of relief, but I'll let the board.
Well, you have a good point, Eric. I
Review
think
that,
in the past, we've looked at kind of, I don't know, lack of a better term, the gravity of the situation of what they're requesting to do versus the current condition. There was something mentioned about if there was a dumpster there or not, and I think there's a requirement regardless to have dumpsters screened. Is there a dumpster on site to your knowledge?
They probably have a dumpster. It's probably old enough they don't necessarily have to comply.
Okay.
I think it's, you know, ideally, I understand the neighborhood sentiments because it would be nice to get some things brought into conformance.
Right, but again, in balance,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
I mean, yeah. To me, if there was something about the sign itself,
right,
or placement of it, or something of that.
It's
you know.
not a electronic reader board sign, is it?
No.
It's just going to be a flat, opaque, regular sign. And to the best of your knowledge, will it be lit? I can ask Rob.
They would be, based on the zoning they have, they would be able to have a lit sign, internally lit.
Okay.
That they would not be able to have that on a wall that would face the residential.
Right, okay. But
to
the north
south,
side
but on the
would.
north side, they're okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Okay, Rod, haven't seen you for a while.
Mark Lyle, 4217 Southeast 4th
Yes.
Court, Des Moines, Iowa. First of all, I'd like to, thanks for the time today. I do appreciate it. Second of all, I'd like to apologize for talking about another sign. So, if I could, that's the sign we're talking about.
Okay.
And so, the top 2 feet-ish is going to be permanent. The bottom 2 or 3 feet-ish would be able to be changed. So you'd have, it's like a letterboard where you can put letters and change those. So what we would do is, you know, talk about, you know, we take credit cards, thank you for your business. We're doing fundraisers or Veterans Day things and things like that. So,
But it'd be a physical sign.
it would
it's
be a
not-
physical
yeah,
sign. It would
okay.
be lit up, and we would make sure. And this isn't a very good picture on the computer, but this is straight on with the street. There's no walls. I mean, you're pretty much stuck with. I mean, you got the change machine right there in front of that. There's no space for that. Not to mention, you're really on a side lot.
Yep.
We bought this about a year and a month ago with another piece of property that we want. They threw it in the deal. I took it, and we cleaned it up. We spent 6 months cleaning up the other property. We're kind of trying to get the sign permit. I told them I didn't want any of my name on it until we cleaned it up. Everything had to work. So that was kind of where we were at with that. We're small. I have a full-time job. I have to take a vacation day just to come do this. So, I mean, I have 2 full-time guys, but I work for a living on the top, and then I do car washes. My guys, we're driving past this all the time, probably 4 or 5 times a day. I usually go before work there and then do it on the way home after work. I don't want my name on it unless it's all working, so that's where we're at now. About 6 months ago, we started trying to get a sign, and the sign, it was like $5,000 to $6,000 depending on where you're at. We end up buying this sign, and we paid less for the sign than what we did to permit to come here today. It was just what it is. So
The sign.
I have a sign. That's the sign we have. So that was the goal. We bought it on an auction cheap. I didn't even see it, and we bought it.
But it's bigger than 9 by 5.
It is bigger than 9 by
45
5.
square
That's
feet.
the problem. I get it. But it's the piece of property it's a decent piece of property. There's no self-serves around that area. You got to go quite a ways. That's one of the things I do when I go there. It's like, where's the nearest competition? Where it's at. There's not a lot. That's why I bought it, and I paid almost nothing for it. On my opinion. But what the scoop is it's got to stand on its own. It makes no money, so I can't spend any more money on a sign. It just I can't do it. And so we're trying to figure out how to do it. This is a way we could do it. We bought the sign on a whim just to hope it, and if not, we'll just scrap it and go from there.
You could paint your logo within the square
And
footage
we have
on the
talked
side
about
of the
that,
building.
but there's also even codes with that they have to do that. And we have talked about that. We've also talked about putting the sign on the roof. Both of those were legal, but it would be nice if it lights up and nice to go there. I talked to the neighbor to the north, Roger, that used to own what used to be Dairy Queen. Yep. He's a nice guy, no problems at all. I don't know if he owns the land. If not, his brother-in-law owns the land. But, I asked him to write a letter. He's in Florida, and I don't think... Okay. The neighbors to the south, both him and his wife, I believe, both have talked to him. They're both in favor of this. I tried to get them to write a letter, and they didn't get it either. But I want to be a good neighbor, and I'm glad that I got this from Jason. I wasn't aware of this. The issues that are on here, we are addressing or talking about addressing. I'll come back to that here in just a minute. But we cleaned the place up. The place was just a dive. And we spent a lot of time cleaning up the other place. Next summer, we're going to try to clean this up more. Everything works. It's a good piece of property. It's in a good location. It's just, it's on the wrong side of the street, with the street that's there. Mm-hmm. The parking lot does need a little bit of asphalt and repair there. I get that. The dumpster, I took it away the day I bought it. I said, I don't want it here. What we do is we take the garbage and put it in a garbage can or garbage bags. We take it to another location because everybody was just dumping it there. They weren't even putting it in the dumpster. They're just dumping it at the place. Yep. Last Saturday, we cleaned up leaves and trying to get ready for snow. So, I want to be a good neighbor. We're trying to clean it up. I talked to one of my managers, assistant manager, last summer about fixing the fence. The fence that I was talking about was not the fence he's talking about. I don't even know that I own that fence, but we will fix it in the sure. And we've already talked to the neighbors about a light in the corner to kind of help things out. But they both said that they're good. The neighbor, the Dairy Queen Roger guy, had a dumpster there. When I took mine away, everybody was dumping at his location, and I was ending up cleaning his place up just because it looked so bad. And I think the city finally did tell him to just take the dumpster away. And I told him thank you for that because it was just, everybody would throw stuff there.
So is that DQ closed permanent or just for the season?
They're going to reopen it. I talked to him like a month or so ago. Yeah. They're going to reopen it as a different place, and it's there. And somebody was supposed to lease it and didn't do what they were supposed to.
So it's sitting idle for the time
It has been
being.
sitting idle since I've bought this building. So I appreciate your time.
Sure. We'll see what we can do here.
I need it's got to make some money before I can put a whole lot of money in it. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
Would you be willing to okay, you're talking about trying to make this thing work, and if we were to give you a temporary time, it didn't work last time, but give you a couple of years to use the sign you for a use to build up the business, is that something you'd be willing to do?
Okay. Yes.
And trade it out.
And then trade it out when it's making money?
The problem is, what happens if it doesn't? It's a small location. Between $500 and $5,000, it's got to make some money. The problem is the RO had to be replaced. I understand. I got 20 grand in it already. I got more in it than I paid for the property on my end of it, what I,
Well, that's what I'm trying to think about, you know, if we were to give you like 5 years.
Where we'd be at, staff's recommending an exception request, which would mean the sign would only need to be 3.5 square foot smaller than it is now.
But he already has it.
Yeah. So the idea that we allow him to put it up temporarily, to take it down, to then put up a sign that's 3.5 square foot smaller.
Okay.
I'd rather say we just decide now which way he gets to go. He either gets to put it up,
I see your
or
point.
he's going to have to come up with something else affordable.
I greatly appreciate it. It is just hard. I mean, I have a full-time job because there's not that much money in it. It's kind of like a 20-year payback, so.
East Army Post and Southeast 14th look good with your.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm there all the time, so.
Thank you.
So I guess I need to discover this one when I'm up that direction. I'll drop in. Okay, any other questions for staff? If none, we'll go to board deliberation. So not to cut anybody off at the pass, but yeah, if we do the exception level, which is the level that can be kind of justified, that'd be about 45 square feet, which is smaller than the sign he owns. That's staff's proposal. If you'd want to grant a variance, he could pop up the sign he's got now. But with a variance, you're supposed to have a little better reasoning behind it. But we can have our discussion.
I almost
and-
think the variance is because the reputation the place is built and it's lost, and he's trying to make it come up again, you know, I mean,
Okay.
that's a situation. He didn't go in to buy this thing. It was thrown in a package and he's trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And I applaud him for that. I mean, it's,
So,
not everybody take it.
I think this side of the room would probably approve a variance, but I don't think any of us are gonna suggest one since that side of the room is against
Okay,
the sign, so I think it's not your guys' time to come up with something.
yeah, if he, we aren't supposed to make decisions based on economic costs. We're just not. But in a case like this, it's like, wow, okay, so we're 3.5 square feet off between a variance and an exception. I mean, I'd be inclined to look at a variance on this one to no more than the 48.5 or whatever he had proposed myself, one time only.
He could use his sign.
One time only?
Yeah, because I think the benefits outweigh any negatives on this one. It wouldn't hurt the essential character of the neighborhood. It's on the same side that's commercial. It's still fairly small, relatively speaking. You know, it doesn't take up half the building. And again, it was an existing business. He would have designed the place differently if he built it. So there's an existing set of building conditions there. So that maybe could lean toward the variance angle in this case, for me. So,
Then I'll shoot the bullet and vote, or move that we grant him the variance for the existing sign.
does that side of the room want to second the motion?
I'll second that. We'll just take baby
Hey,
steps.
this is like
that
city
direction,
council.
Mel. After 3 hours and 10 minutes, you've made a lot of movement toward this side.
Okay,
Oh.
so we've got a motion and a second to grant the variance. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That's okay. All right, so motion carries 5-1, Mark, so you can put that sign up. You bet. Keep working at that place and hopefully business will pick up. All right, have a good evening. Okay, so business, Bert handed out our schedule for next year.
Yep.
He also handed out an updated contact list that has all of our updated emails, right, Dave? Yep, so we're all good there. So those that were here last month, if you've reviewed the minutes, anybody want to make a motion for approval? Moved by Cindy.
Perfect.
Second. I'll second that. All those in favor of approving the minutes from last month, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries for that simple majority, which was before 4 folks, including Cindy. Okay, all right. Any other business, Mr. Drost? Okay, this hearing is adjourned.